Call the meeting to order. A roll call by each entity. County Commission.
You would like the County Commission first?
Yes, please.
Okay. Chairman Larkin?
Here.
Vice Chair Bonnie Weber? Here. John Bredernitz is absent. Oh, he's present by telephone. Kitty Jung? Present. Dave Humke? County Manager Katie Simon? Assistant District Attorney Paul Liparelli?
Here.
I'm Nancy Parent, Chief Deputy Clerk.
For Sparks? Here. 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 Here.
Here.
City of Reno, and I don't think we have a quorum yet.
Hester. Here. Sadra.
Here.
Sparata. Absent George. Absent Ayazi. Absent Michelle.
Here. Well, we'll go ahead and start this meeting, and then we'll hope that one of my flock will come through. All right. Public comment.
We go to the school district roll call, please.
Excuse me, school district. I apologize.
Mr. Mayor, I'll be doing the honors. Dan Karn, absent. Barbara Clark, absent. Ken Green, here. Stella Gutierrez, absent. Scott Kelly, I'm here. John Mayer, absent. Barbara McClary.
Here.
Mr. Mayor, we don't have a quorum either.
Okay. Well, we're going to go ahead and start this meeting anyway. And now we'll go to public comment.
We have several public comments this morning. Mike Churn from Collin Ranch Homeowners Association. And he'll be followed by Sam Dene.
My name is Mike Churn, Collin Ranch Homeowners Association board member serving as treasurer. I'm accompanied today by our community manager, Lori Olson. Our president, Mike Hefner, spoke at the Washoe Commission meeting last week, voicing concern about potential degradation of fire and emergency service resulting from deconsolidation. I'm not going to repeat his comments, but we do have copies of that statement for those that may not have heard it and would want to read it later. Mike pointed out that Collin Ranch has about 1,900 homes in Reno, about 300 in Washoe County. This may have sounded like 1,900 homes that could be serviced from the corner of Hunter Lake and Mayberry, handled rapidly, while 300 homes would get a response from a fire station in Verdi, possibly at greater risk. What needs to be recognized is that those 300 homes in the county are in the heart of Collin Ranch. And what happens to them happens to us all. There are also some areas of the county that abut the border of Collin Ranch. I have a personal example. We moved into Collin Glen, one of the 26 ranch neighborhoods in 1997. A few years later, a home within the county, but 2 lots away from our home, caught fire in a propane accident and burned to the ground. We watched this from our balcony, separated from that fire mostly by Alum Creek, until the heat drove us inside. Shortly thereafter, we were notified to evacuate the neighborhood and left not knowing if we would see our home again. I do not know what fire department showed up. I just know they handled the situation. We are not taking a position with the city nor with the county. Our position is simply that we have an expectation of continued or increased service level. We believe that increased regionalization for fire services is in the best interest of all northern Nevada citizens, and the deconsolidation moves in the opposite direction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sam Dene, followed by John Eric Johnston.
Sam Dene, the philanthropical, it's hard to say the word, isn't it? topical encyclopedia of Reno government, which means he does everything out of the goodness of his heart and for free. Even the advertisement I did with the mayor a couple of months ago, everybody must have thought I was paid thousands of dollars for that, but I did it for free. And by the way, I'm announcing right now, this is the last time I'm coming to one of these public comment podiums with all of you poobahs, and it's the last time that I'm going to criticize the dirty, rotten, evil, disconjurculated Reno media. April Fools, one day late. Did I get anybody? Anyway, I'm here to talk about, I'm an Air Force Academy graduate. Excuse me, what am I doing, talking in first person? Sam is an Air Force Academy graduate, spent many years flying fighters and bombers, B-52 bombers and F-4 Phantoms. There, finally a chortle, he just got it. It's great, I like that. At any rate, defending our nation against all the enemies inside of the borders and outside of the borders, and I found through the years that we have almost as many enemies inside of the borders as outside of the borders. And one of the poignant points to make here is just take a look at this fire department, firefighter situation. We have, Reno has arguably the best firefighting operation in all of America, proven by the latest successful attempts to put out those horrible fires, although some people did lose their homes. The best firefighting operation in America, and what do? What does this community do? They try to disband it. Dismember it? What is going on? This is so ludicrous. Nobody would possibly believe such a situation is taking place. Why don't you get a mediator? My good friend Judge Bill Manel would do it out of the goodness, philanthropically, out of the goodness of his heart. You need somebody come in here without a pony in the rodeo and get them to take a look at this thing and straighten this all out. There may be some beefs on both sides, but this is crazy to dismantle this wonderful firefighting operation. Secondly, I want to say, wow, I'm out of time already. Too many jokes. At any rate, as far as the senior services and the daybreak versus pets and animals, I have the greatest dog in the world. I got him over at the Animal Control Center. My little pit bull guard dog saves me from people trying to attack my house and rob me. I love dogs. I love animals. But on the other hand, there ought to be a way to save daybreak. And bottom line, there's this thing called the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. That fellow right there should look into it and find out there's dozens of millions of dollars just groveling around down in there hiding.
John Eric Johnson, followed by Connie McMullen.
Thank you. My name is John Eric Johnson. I want to first say that I am here representing nobody. I speak only for myself. I'm a lifelong resident of Washoe County. I'm a homeowner in Cold Springs. I will be directly impacted by the raising of my taxes and the diminishment of service in fire protection. It is my life, the life of my wife, my children, that this deconsolidation will put in danger. I'm also a professional fire captain with 16 years on the job. I'm also a registered nonpartisan. I've voted and campaigned for both parties. I have to say, as a taxpayer and a citizen, I am sick of the bickering and the non-cooperation at all levels of government. That being said, you have a plan that this deconsolidation is not necessary. You have a regionalization plan that was the result of cooperation between these two entities, which I would again applaud. This plan is sustainable. It does not diminish service, it improves it. It incorporates better training and more involvement for the volunteers. It gives the commission a seat at the table. All these things that we wanted to achieve, this plan can do it. This plan deserves a fair hearing. And you know, your financial analyst has said, the county's financial analyst has said that this plan is not sustainable. This is the same financial analyst that said that you could stand up your own department for $700,000. That figure now stands at $1.7 million with a tax increase for me as a homeowner. What I would respectfully submit to this joint body is that you take the time to get the facts. If you don't believe the city's numbers and the city doesn't believe you, then what I would suggest is that you take the time, get an independent audit, that someone you can both agree on, and get the facts, because facts are really important in fire protection. If you get the facts wrong, people die. I would stress that this is not a union plan, this is not a city plan. This was a result of the cooperation between these two bodies. It's a good plan, it deserves to be looked at. You have an opportunity right now to have your legacy be that of just politics as usual, which a lot of people are predicting, or you can have the courage to do what's right. That's not easy, but to set aside the petty differences and all the stuff that's gone before and do what's right for the taxpayers and the citizens of Washoe County. I would respectfully ask that you do so. Thank you.
Connie McMullen, followed by Donna Kluntz.
For the record, Connie McMullen. I had a parent that lost a home in a fire, and I can only imagine what it would be like to lose a mother in a fire. My heart goes out to the people of this community. I'm here, though, on behalf of Washoe County Senior Services Advisory Board, and I'm here to express my concern for the funding of senior programs in our county. The board supports funding of this year's budget and additional source of funding, if one can be found other than the ad valorem tax. Per today's budget item on your agenda, you will see that Senior Services provides fundings for the City of Reno. The next level is followed by the City of Sparks and the unincorporated areas. It is our belief that elder programs, if they are going to sustain going into the future, need to find another funding source in addition to the one we have. There are over 5,000 seniors receiving services in Washoe County, with even higher numbers receiving Meals on Wheels in their homes and at congregate locations totaling over 160,000, or rather 6,000. We anticipate that the need will not decline, but only going up with the aging of our community and the aging of baby boomers. These programs are a stress. They keep the stress off the safety net and keep people out of institutions. We ask that you take this into consideration because it is only going to get bigger. There are potholes in the safety net, and they're only going to get deeper. Thank you.
Donna Klontz, followed by Steve Perez.
Good morning, Donna Klontz. I'm a member of the Reno Senior Citizens Advisory Board, and I'm also here to ask you to continue the talking to keep the funding in the Washoe County in the Washoe County budget for senior services. Those funds amount to only $230,000 in a budget of many millions, and this allocation of $230,000 brings us matches from federal and state sources that mean we can get 2, 3, 5, even 10 times more money for the programs that provide for our seniors here. I had a friend who was in her very late 90s who lived in a little mobile home park here in Washoe County, and she was nearly deaf and nearly blind and could hardly walk by the time she was 96, 97 years old, had a lot of health problems. But she was fiercely independent. She wanted to stay at home, and she received the help of Washoe County Senior Services. She had visiting nurses, social workers, Meals on Wheels, and she had a dedicated volunteer that was her lifesaver from the RSVP program, who made all those things work for her and who went and got all those services to happen for her. And she was able to stay at home until she died. Every dollar that you spend on senior services saves lives and gives essential care, food on the table, and a better quality of life to our seniors. I want to commend all of you from the cities, from the county, from the schools, from the fire services for meeting together today. So many of the services that you perform are regional and done best in partnership with each other, senior services being just one of those. I ask you to put aside your differences and continue to work together to solve the dilemma of how to provide all the essential services for us with so much less money to go around. I think that the solution lies in continuing a regional approach that you're working on today and embracing the idea that Nevada needs a better system of raising enough money to pay for the services that the majority of us agree that we need. All of us must convince our legislature and our governor that it's really time to restructure the current tax structure and build one that will provide a stable and fair source of funds for services that we all need. I urge you to continue using this joint process on a regular basis. This should be only the beginning of you meeting together now and then when the problems show themselves to be so big that we can only solve them by working together. So thank you for your work on that.
Steve Perez.
Good morning. Steve Perez. I live in Bear Creek, down south. I find it ironic that the city of Reno is upset because they're being asked to provide fire and medical protection to a few areas that they are not receiving taxes from. Sierra Fire provided fire protection and paramedic coverage to both Reno and Truckee Meadow areas without compensation for some 7 years due to Reno's cherry-picking annexation policies during the last 10 to 11 years. We were told by Reno Fire we weren't part of the agreement and we should just man up. In the meantime, we became very insolvent and created the situation that Sierra finds itself in today. In 35 years in the fire service and 9 years since retiring, I have never heard of a fire service entity ever threatening to protect, not to protect any constituent. Commissioners, I want to remind you of an important point that I shared with you a while back. Truckee Meadows Station 14 at Walmart location down south was and still remains your #1 bargaining chip in this entire process. That station services such a large area of Reno constituents, it should offset almost all of the areas that Reno continues to put into the newspaper and the media. Don't give that advantage away. Also, as the fire study recommended, divide all of the areas in this entire region into first-in station response areas. What that is whatever station responds to any property, then that station should receive those fire taxes accordingly. That way, no one is responding into an area and not being compensated for it. There is nothing that can be put in place by any meeting that you have that is fairer than that. If you provide service, you get compensated. And that will accomplish a number of things. First, each jurisdiction, will be compensated for fire and medical. If it provides a service, it gets paid. And second, this plan would stop further cherry-picking annexations that they just can't go in and annex an area and expect to receive all of those taxes. If they don't provide fire service, they don't get the taxes from any annexed area. So it accomplishes a number of things. It levels out the entire system, and it solves your problem. There's no politics involved. Whatever station responds, that station gets paid. Thank you.
That's all the public comment I have this morning.
Okay. We'll close the public comment section. We'll go to approval of the agenda.
Approve.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Priority, you meant the school district, Washoe County School District.
Yeah. Okay. After item 10, yes. Any other changes or corrections? Chair will entertain a motion. I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a second. All in favor say aye. Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimously. Approval of the minutes for February 6th. All right. Do I have a second? I have a second. All in favor say aye. Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimously. Go to item 6, discussion potential direction to staff possible approval of proposed First Amendment to the Interlocal Cooperative Agreement Truckee River Flood Management Project. It relates to the voting structure.
Mr. Mayor, this is Katie Simon, County Manager. I believe that there have been discussions since each of the entities met on this item. Perhaps Greg Salter and the attorneys could come forward and discuss what's proposed to you.
Okay.
Good morning, Greg Salter with the DA's office, and with me is Susan Ball-Roth. We found a couple of errors in the First Amendment that was approved by Washoe County and the city's parks, a couple of typographical errors. We also found some opportunities to better consolidate the important issues that need to have a supermajority vote if the new voting structure is approved. One of the errors we found, if you have a copy of the draft in front of you, is in paragraph 2A. On the second page, there was a typographical error. It reads, the master plans and regulatory measures for inclusion in development codes under 405 should read 402B. There's a couple of other ministerial changes in 3A. We're going to add the word charge for fees. We're going to eliminate the reference in 3B to paragraph 603. And then the significant change that we're suggesting is that we take the locally preferred plan, which is a plan that we file with the Corps of Engineers. It's a plan that's part of the environmental impact statement, and it's part of our deal with the Corps that shows what we're going to build. And together with the capital improvements plan, which shows the state of Nevada what we're going to build and is a part of our budget. And also what's called the Chapter 377B plan, which is a plan that of all the facilities that will be built with the infrastructure tax. Move them all together into the same category. It takes a supermajority, 75% or better, a vote of the Board of Directors to approve any one of those three. Also, the capital improvements plan needs to be presented by the flood board, needs to be presented to each governing body, the Washoe County Commission, Sparks City Council, Reno City Council, before it can be approved. So we suggest that we move all of those three plans into the super majority category. I think those were the significant changes. So what is being proposed here is we're moving away from the unanimous voting requirement into setting up a system where there would be a supermajority requirement for the really important items. And because it's a supermajority, it will require the buy-in of all three governments in order to make it happen, because we'll have to have 5 out of 6 votes to approve the CIP, the LPP, any significant change of the bylaws of the authority. All the rates, fees, rates, and charges will have to be approved by 5 of the 6 members of the board. And any financing agreements or debt instruments will have to be approved by 5 of the 6 members of the board. Now, this would include once we start prioritizing and deciding which projects will get built, that is a financing agreement, because the Flood Authority would enter into an agreement with the City of Reno or with the City of Sparks to finance a project, and that will require a supermajority vote. Are there any questions?
If I may, Susan Ball-Roth, Deputy City Attorney, City of Reno. When this matter came up before our governing body last week, in reviewing what had been approved and the staff report, there was no mention of what I called the left-hand side of the column. In other words, the agreement action, as to that there were certain things being relocated or had been perhaps eliminated and it was a concern. So I presented those at our meeting, the city council meeting, and was requested to talk to Greg Salter, which I did. And that is where it was, when I pointed out those concerns I had, for example, the regulatory section, he informed me that that was incorrectly omitted and it was a typo. My other concern was I did the adoption of the amendment of an infrastructure tax plan had been eliminated. Discussed those, he indicated that he would, and they have been pursuant to his our discussion and his representations here today, have been added back in. Of course, it's for the governing bodies to determine the voting structure they want. There is some situations, and it's important to note in the voting structure, the agreement action, there are certain actions that would require just 4 of 6 and some of 5 of 6. And it's important to point out that if the voting structure is just a majority and not a supermajority, you could have a situation where a matter would pass without a representative from one entity being present. And I think that's very important to note. But you also need to look at the fact that in your current voting structure, even though it's unanimous, it's only of those who are present at the meeting, not the full body. At least a supermajority requires, it's not just those at present, but it's all members of the Flood Management Authority.
Comments, Mr. Smith?
2 questions. On the supermajority, if we have items on the agenda that requires a supermajority, we can't act on them at all if we don't have everybody there. Is that correct?
That's right. You would it would require 5 votes, and so if you only have 4 people there, you have a quorum to conduct your other business, but you would not be able to vote on any item that requires a supermajority.
Okay. One more question. My gosh, it slipped my mind. The county and the city of Sparks have already approved this agreement, but you've got some changes. Do we have to re-vote on this now?
We would suggest that it go back through in fact, maybe it could be done today, because these are minor amendments to the agreements that have been proposed, and so we could probably vote on that today. Or we can run it back through the Washoe County and Sparks on consent. I just found out that the Sparks City Attorney's Office hasn't seen the red line that went out on Friday, and so they may want to have a chance to take a look at it too.
How do these changes go back to the original agreement that we had with the supermajority voting? Because that's what we were set up to do originally.
Well, in fact, that's the reason that some of these errors occurred. Is I went back to the October version of the interlocal agreement and tried to take us back to where we were in October 2010 before we made the last-minute change to go to unanimous voting, and that's where things got a little mixed up because we had some extra categories of approvals in there. And that's why we had the split of LPP and requiring one kind of vote and so on. But this is the same as the original agreement that we were looking at in October of 2010 with 2 exceptions. One exception is in the original agreement, we said that if there was going to be a major change to the enterprise, if there was going to be an amendment to the interlocal agreement, if a member was going to withdraw, if there was going to be a merger, or if there was going to be a dissolution of the authority. In the old agreement in October, we said that each of the governing bodies would have to approve that, plus it would take a supermajority vote of the board. In the unanimous agreement that did get approved, we said the same thing. It'd be a unanimous of the board of directors of the flood project and the consent of all 3 governing bodies. In this version, we took the board of directors out of that loop, and the reason is that if the City Council of Reno and the City Council of Sparks and the Washoe County Commission, who created this entity and who have delegated some of their legislative powers to it, if they want something done, it should be done. And it's kind of superfluous to have their representatives who sit on the board of directors say the same thing that they've already said. So we took the board of directors out of the decision loop in those very significant items. The other thing we did is we took the approval of the budget, which used to be in the supermajority category in October, of course was in the unanimous category under the present agreement, and we moved that down to a simple majority. And the reason we did that is because that's what state law requires.
To be clear, it does not have to go back to the board if it passes the 3 entities again?
Well, it can be done here.
That's what I mean. The
Yeah,
board does not have to vote on this if all 3 entities.
It is an amendment to what you've already approved, and so it does need to go back to Sparks and the county commission because it's a change to something.
But the board will not be voting on this if it's approved.
Flood Management Authority hasn't voted on this at all yet.
I know that, Greg. I'm asking if it gets passed by these 3 entities, does it go back to the board?
Yes.
And does it have to be a consensus vote? It does.
A unanimous vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And I would ask Cheryl, what do you want to? Do you want a chance to read this, or what do you want to do?
For our office, have a chance to reread it. It's my understanding that Mr. Thornley did meet with, or has reviewed it, but I think council understand the changes and be briefed on it.
Ms. Reddy.
I just wanted to clarify one thing. So you said that under the new rules, all would have to be present, but isn't it only that 5 would have to be present?
It would require a vote. If it's a supermajority item,
right,
it would require an affirmative vote of 5 of the 6 members.
So 5 people would have to be there and all 5 would have to say yes, but not all 6.
Mr. Guston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question to raise at the City Council meeting, and I didn't hear it this morning, and that is that in the majority vote, have you taken into consideration that you would have to have a affirmative or a negative vote if the issue didn't pass from each of the entities? Because with a majority vote, you could have you could have one entity, if it was a positive vote, you could have 4 of them with the affirmative vote and 2 with the negative, and that entity would not be able to affect the outcome of the vote if both of their members voted against the measure.
That could occur in a majority vote scenario.
So have you
keeping
taken
in mind that we have tried to engineer this arrangement so that the really important things that all 3 governments should sign off on have been moved into the supermajority category. So as a practical matter, we're hoping that the supermajority rule prevents one entity from not having a say in the important things. What's going to get built, when it's going to get built, how it's going to get built. Those are all supermajority items. Some of the more routine things, budget isn't routine, but we're forced by state law to use the majority vote structure on the budget. But some of the more ministerial things, approving of payments, approving of routine contracts, and that sort of thing, you're right, it could happen where one entity wouldn't be able to influence an outcome.
My focus is on the budget, which is probably the most important issue facing all the entities right now. And you say a budget issue could be approved with just a simple majority.
Yes. And again, that's required by state law, so there wasn't much we could do with that.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor, just to amplify on Mr. Salter's comment in response to Councilman Guston, the approval of the budget itself, like all of the member agencies do every year, is a majority vote. However, the capital improvement plan is a supermajority item, and no budget process could operate unless the capital improvement plan was in place and approved by the supermajority. So to use an example, you could have a budget that included a project and you could vote for the budget, but unless that project was in the CIP, you couldn't build it. So the assurance for each of the members is that in the approval of the CIP, each of the have the opportunity to approve that, and if 5 out of 6 members of the board approve it, it's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Liparelli. I have one other question, just make sure that I understood the comment earlier, and that is that if there is a supermajority vote and it's approved at the Flood Planning Commission, that it needs to go back to each entity and be approved at that entity.
No, there is one category where it would require an approval by a governing body, and that would be if the Board of Directors of the Flood Authority decided to implement some master plan amendments or some amendments that involve development codes and that sort of thing. That would have to go to the affected member. If there was, like, for a master plan amendment for Reno's code, would have to, of course, be approved by the Reno City Council. But on the other matters, the only exception is if the CIP is being approved by the Board of Governors of the Flood Management Authority, the Board of Governors has to make a presentation to all 3 governing bodies first. Doesn't have to obtain approval under this agreement, but at least has to make a presentation so all 3 governing bodies can see what's going to get built in the program. And for that matter, when it's going to get built, because these are 5-year rolling CIPs.
I guess the nature of my question was at the City Council meeting, it was discussed and talked about the fact that City Council didn't approve rates or tolls, yet they could be approved by the Commission on a supermajority vote.
Council Member Gustin, Susan Ballroth, Deputy City Attorney, if I may. It was no, and there was a typo on the attachment C that was presented to council at the meeting last week, and it's a supermajority of all members, not just those present at the meeting. And that being the case, you would have to have at least 1 representative. So you'd have to have 5 of 6, though there would not be a situation where you would not have one entity having a member present to vote and pass rates, tolls, and charges.
But you could have one member of that entity voting for, another against, so a rate or toll could be assessed against the citizens of Reno by one council person voting in the affirmative.
Yes, you would just need 5 of 6.
Thank you.
Mr. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. Greg, just real quick to make sure I understood what you said. So these changes have to go back to the entities, and we vote on them, and a majority vote from the entities, and then it goes to the authority, and one person on the authority can hang it up?
Yes.
Okay, is there a way we can do it the other way around? Because I can see the handwriting on the wall that we all do it. It goes to the authority and gets voted down. I mean, so we're wasting a lot of time.
Susan Ballroth, Deputy City Attorney. Yes, it could go the other way around. You could go to the Flood Management Authority first and then to each entity.
Well, that's the way I'd like to see it done.
Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Hazy.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to have some discussion either individually or here. We had this meeting on January 14th when we were first forming the flood agency, and the choice was given was either a unanimous vote or look at the representation. We do not have another board in this community that's represented 2, 2, and 2. It's usually population-based or based on some other assessment so that everyone is sitting at the table, has an equal responsibility there. And that never came up in this discussion. We're still keeping the 2, 2, and 2. Now, you have to keep in mind that we've given this board taxing authority, which means they can raise taxes that could go toward school district or something else without a vote anywhere else. And that was the big, huge discussion, was whether we would let 6 individuals decide or whether we would expand the board and have that based more equally along the representational, whether it's assessed valuation or population or what. So I think that, to me, is how we would weigh this together. And I made the comment back then, I could go either way, not have a unanimous vote, but it would have to be a different representation on this board so that one group would have more representation on there than another one, a less affected group. I think that's only fair. The other thing I think is sort of interesting, this came about. I'm not sure why it came about, quite honestly, but from what I hear, it came about because of some problems at the flood board right now. None of these changes would fix that. None of these changes would fix that problem, because there's still 2 members of the board that have been consistently voting no on certain issues, and 2 members of the board of two different members voting consistently on another issue to say no. So supermajority doesn't get us there anyway. So unless we fix the fundamental problem, which this is just tap dancing around it, I don't see us getting anywhere. But the one thing I really want to make clear to everyone is the flood project's moving forward just like it's always been moving forward. Whether we've had our problems about who the executive director is or not, we're still working with the Army Corps. The Army Corps has to come forward. We've spent $100 million on flood control locally, and we don't even know how much the projects cost us, individual projects. So I don't have confidence yet in this flood authority to come forward with this to tax anyone. We have to do some more work. I think we have to change things up and do things a little differently than has been done in the past, because they've changed in the Army Corps stance. And until that gets done, I'm asking for a little more accountability in the board. So I'm not going to be supporting this unless we talk about representation also, and we actually get to the crux of what the issues are. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Lepperly.
Mr. Mayor, you know what it's like when you have more than one lawyer in the room. You have more than one opinion, and I have to tell you that I don't agree with the notion that this has to go back to the FMA board for endorsement. I think if the 3 entities who created this agency vote to change the structure's changed. And if that structural change includes taking the FMA board out of the process of approving amendments to the interlocal agreement, then it's my belief that when it happens without the FMA board's endorsement.
Any other comments? Yes.
That's an interesting turn of development there. So the question is then, if that's your opinion, is that the opinion of the other 2 entities? Because obviously we make a decision here today, 1 or all 2 or 3 are going to end up in court. The last thing I want to do is spend taxpayer dollars on lawyers.
Ms. Jones?
Get an answer from the other entities in terms of what Councilman Lawson just asked for? Or you're not in agreement, you're in agreement?
I'm having a problem conceptually because your agreement that is in place now requires a vote of the FMA and each entity. He's saying that by amending it today, that because of the fact that if all 3 of you have now eliminated that requirement, that an amendment has to go back to each entity. To me, I'm not buying that argument, but that causes me concern, and I don't know, Sparks.
John Cadlick, Reno City Attorney. I think we would like to take the time as the City Attorney's Office to analyze the situation posed by Ms. Dryazzi. I think at this time it's premature to go ahead and vote on it today. That's just my opinion as City Attorney. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Jones.
So are we going to have the discussion here? I'll wait for the Sparks attorney.
Cheryl Lighting on behalf of the City of Sparks, City Attorney's Office. I agree with Mr. Cadlick. I'd ask for time before a vote to review this agreement.
Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So are we going to have a discussion at this time with everybody that's at the table, at least in terms of the voting structure of how we'd like the FMA to look like? Because otherwise, we're going to meet again. We'll, gloriously approve the agenda and the minutes, and then nothing else gets done. And so, while I agree with Councilman Ayazi, it is moving forward, I still believe that we need the funds transferred over, we need a director, we need all of these other things so that we can start building these projects, and especially the shovel-ready ones, as well as demonstrate to the Corps that we're a serious community about flood control.
Mr. Smith.
I'm going to do 2 things here. I'm going to disagree with Mr. Kerrigan. Sitting on the Sparks City Council, I represent Sparks' interest. So if the city council tells me to vote one way or to consider their decisions, that's what I would do. That's why I think it should go to the entities before it goes to the board, if it has to go to the board at all. Changing the makeup of the board, changing the number of members, there's no little player here. Everybody has a stake in flooding, and Sparks has we have the smallest population, but we have one of the biggest areas of problem, which is our industrial area. We have just as much say in this flood project as anybody else does. So I'll disagree with Mr. Ayazi on, it doesn't matter how big a population is, we have the chances of flooding our area is just as great or greater than anybody else. And I'd like to read a statement if I could. In a recent newspaper article dated March 29th, 2012, it was stated that the Reno City Council put off a vote that would change the voting structure of the Flood Management Authority. Reasons given by the two Reno members of the Flood Authority were disingenuous at best. It's true that the Corps of Engineers has changed our project from a 117-year protection level to a 50-year level. But never, and I repeat never, has the Flood Management Authority said we would not replace the Virginia Street Bridge. In fact, we have funded the design and visioning process to the tune of slightly under $5 million. We have always said that with or without the Corps, the Reno elements of this flood project will be paid for with funds generated through the Flood Management Authority. The change in voting structure would not affect any of the features now being planned to protect Reno from future flooding. Not only is the Flood Management Authority charged with providing regional flood protection, it is also charged with raising the funds to build that flood protection. Taxation without representation, I think not. The FMA does not have the power to tax. The state only allows us the authority to assess fees to raise funds for the project. Sparks has been collecting fees for over 3 years to help fund a portion of this project. It is clear that there is no desire to do the same in Reno at this time. Let's kick the can down the road so this council can place this responsibility on future Reno councils. The real issue here is that the current voting structure is clearly not working. Do we want flood protection or not? Do we want to work cooperatively and move this project forward or not? We are fighting over the issuance of a contract to hire an executive director that, by consensus vote, we hired last October. The last offer from the City of Reno was a 4-month contract, which was rejected not only by the authority, but by the acting executive director. I know that the City of Sparks and the county are committed to this project and committed to being a full partner with the Corps of Engineers. As the current chairman of the Flood Management Authority, I am asking that the City of Reno help get this project back on track. We cannot afford to continue down this path of divisive actions. Thank you.
Mayor Martini.
Just one thought about who's most affected by the flood. I'm not saying Reno is or Sparks is, but I think the most affected is Washoe County because we are all in Washoe County, are we not? So let's just make this board up of people from Washoe County. So I don't say it, and now we're going to get into another argument. Who's most affected? Am I? I think we are. Reno thinks they are. The county thinks they are. So, it's just another cog in the wheel that to me is just not going to work. Thanks.
Ms. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Katie Simon, Washoe County Manager, for the record. A great deal of analysis went into the proposed voting representation structure that exists now, and we'd be happy to bring all of that back to you if you want to revisit it. There were, I believe, about 13 different models analyzed. I know the mayors were both involved in a lot of that discussion, and I believe, Mayor Cashel, you were one that said the sort of senatorial model really worked best, given all of the variables. But we're not prepared today to bring that analysis to you. It would require a lot of bringing forward of data. So I'm sure if that's your direction, we can bring that back to you. It has been well vetted.
Okay. Mr. Humke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wonder if some flood staffer or county staffer can describe the effect of the delay on some of the issues the chair of the Flood Management Authority described. We're running off the clock here, and we still don't have an executive director under contract. We don't even have a chairman. Now, the public has been clamoring for these joint meetings because they're so dang good. Let's inform the public. Can someone do that, please? Thank you.
Mr. Aldean.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the record, Jay Aldean with the Flood Project. I would have to agree with some of the comments that were made by our Director Ayazi. We are working with the Corps. The Corps is continuing to get the project moving forward. I have a meeting with General Weir next Monday. It's a very important meeting where I can discuss some very difficult questions that I want to ask and pose. Regarding our staff and how the frustration level of our staff is extremely high. I think that the board's failure to nominate anyone as the executive director has been difficult at best for our staff. It is also difficult in trying to be able to receive the funding, as Director Jung said, mentioned, because we can't stand up our agency without an executive director. As far as moving and planning, our staff is doing that on a weekly basis. We are moving, trying to develop a plan going forward with or without the Corps. We think that that is the prudent thing to do, and I am wholeheartedly supporting that. So that's probably the best response I could give to you, Director Humke.
Thank you very much. Mr. Green.
I just wanted to take a moment and I wanted to, out here in public, that obviously school district is a huge player in the flood and has a huge concern over this, from our bus yards out off Kleppe to, we have over 100 facilities in this county and schools, and we've been through this flooding before, and it's been, disastrous financially. So I just want that to be up front.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question for staff, if anybody has an answer to this. We've been doing this since about '98. Do we have any idea of how many unanimous votes we've had for the flood board already?
The record, Jay Aldean. I've heard a number tossed out there at around 1,300.
We've had 1,300 votes,
Unanimous
all
votes.
of them been unanimous, and now we're down to one that's not. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Azzi, you had something, then we're going to...
Yes, since everyone's here, and I agree that we all wanted a public meeting, and we don't really want to discuss things, so I don't mind doing this. I agree with Mr. Smith that, yes, everyone's affected, but when it comes to taxing, others will be affected that aren't involved in flooding. And people will get taxed. I know it's not a tax, it's a fee, because it feels different coming out of my wallet if it's a fee. It's not the same as a tax. But this authority can put a fee on everyone in Washoe County. So I believe that that's where representation comes in play, is not what gets built so much as who's paying for it. Right now it's paid for just out of sales tax that everyone's been paying for, and also part of it through a fee that Sparks put on its sewer bills. The item that says that the Virginia Street Bridge would be replaced under this, that's part of our issue. We asked to have that on the agenda for flood control, to transfer money to the city of Reno to build this Virginia Street Bridge. It was taken off by the chair. So we couldn't even discuss it at that meeting. City of Reno is also committed to doing flood control. We're so committed that two of us went to Sacramento ourselves and told the Corps we would support their position of a 50-year plan, which took out a lot of the portions in downtown Reno. Almost all of the downtown Reno stuff is now taken off. And we thought that it was still important enough that we will support that to do the 50-year plan. When we're in Washington, one member of the delegation told the general that he couldn't live with the 50-year plan. And that caused some grief. We're trying to deal with the Army Corps of Engineers and also with ourselves. But I think, as Mr. Schmidt just said, we've had over 1,300 unanimous votes. We get a few that aren't unanimous, and all of a sudden everyone wants to change the rules. I say we keep the rules the way they are, or we change the makeup of the board. We deal with the issues at hand, because things are still getting done the way they're getting done. We still have to determine how much individual. I'm appalled that we don't have a list of what projects have to be done and how much they cost. After $100 million, we do not have that list. And we're trying to get those done now, we're pushing toward that. So if everyone wants to talk about that later at their own entities, that's fine. I do believe that we need to talk about the representation of the board if we're going to be able to levy fees. First formed this committee, that was the major concern from the taxpayers, is that this board could levy fees. They wanted to really have a strong hold over how that could happen, so that it couldn't be done rushed manner or all the way through real quickly with just a few people making that decision. So under this scenario, even under this scenario, only one person from the city of Sparks would have to vote to raise fees everywhere, or one person from the county commission, or one person from the city of Reno. That's not even close to a majority of the representation on the city council. So I don't know if it's just we're not going to talk about it at all, about the representation model, or we're just going to let it die and it will drift off and kick the can down the road, so we speak. But I'm here to talk about it today, but if no one wants to talk about it, then that's exactly what we're doing. We're just postponing it for another month or two.
Mr. Larkin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Liparelli, the motion or the proposal that Mr. Salter had placed out meets with your approval?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Salter conferred with Ms. Ball-Roth from the City Attorney's Office on some of those changes, but it's my understanding that the City Attorney's Office from Sparks hasn't had a full opportunity to scrutinize the changes. So I can say from the District Attorney's Office, we're satisfied with it. I think the City of Reno may or may not be, and the City of Sparks is asking for some more time.
Thank you, Mr. Liparelli. So we are so agendized to, if a motion was made by a commissioner to move forward, at least with this proposal, to move forward with changing the voting structure.
Mr. Chairman, you're engaged in a four-way simultaneous meeting, actually three, because the school district doesn't have a quorum today. But as the county commission, you could take action. It's on the agenda. You could vote on it.
Mr. Mayor, when the time is right, then I would offer commissioners an opportunity to make a motion if they are so inclined to do so at this time.
Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Aldean, I'm going to have to ask you a question, so if you could make your way down. Oh, there you are. This meeting with General Weir, where is it and what time on Monday?
It's here locally and at 4 o'clock.
Okay. And where at?
It's at our offices, Flood Project offices.
I'm going to be there.
Okay.
I have a question for Sparks, maybe Mr. Manager. How much money has Sparks raised in this sewer fee that is going toward dedicated to flood?
The fee is specifically for the improvement of the North Truckee drain, and to date we've raised about $8 million approximately.
And how much is that project going to cost?
Current estimates are right around $50 million, and that is substantially lower than we started with.
And how long have you been collecting those fees?
5 years.
5 years. Thank you. I'm not prepared to vote on this, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Mayor. I think that it doesn't solve the problems that we're having at this board. And I did ask at our last meeting that we have a professional mediator come in, ask Mr. Aldean to arrange that because of the dysfunction and the lack of trust there. So do you have any update on that, Mr. Aldean?
We have a couple of ideas that we wanted to put in front of the board on our next meeting on the 13th, and we'll let the board deliberate on that.
We also had, I think everybody received letters from professional mediation services here in the Truckee Meadows who have offered to do it for free. Are you in receipt of that letter?
I have not seen that letter.
I'll get you the letter. That's also on the Board of County Commissioners agenda as well, but they have offered to do it for free, and I think the time, we should have obviously done this about 6 months ago, but we got to get moving on this. And but I will not support the new voting structure, and because it doesn't solve the problems that are facing us today. We'll be in the same exact meeting next month. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wish to have someone explain to the entities gathered here today, if two members of the flood project went to Sacramento and spoke with the Army Corps about reducing to a 50-year flood project, who had the authority to do that, and was that like you're carrying a message from the flood project?
Mr. Isaac.
Thank you. I contacted the Army Corps to meet with them because I didn't think I was getting information from our staff. And I didn't go there with any authority other than my own, and I told them that I personally would support theirs. It wasn't a message from flood control, it was a message from me. And I wanted to know exactly what was happening, what was going on, because I was not getting the messages at our meetings about where we were with the Army Corps. So I had to go on my own.
Ms. Young.
Another occasion, that was Flood Director Speraza and Ayazi that went on that occasion, Madam Vice Chairwoman. Another occasion, Councilman or Director Ayazi and myself went down to the to the Army Corps in Sacramento because we were requested to meet, and it was, and our chairman of the board was also on the phone. And that's when we were able to garner a promise from the Corps that they would find the $385,000 to $485,000 to finish up their study, which we expect to be in receipt of at the end of June. So that was authorized. It was a meeting. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Larkin.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would offer to the Board of County Commissioners, if there is a motion that a commissioner would like to make at this point in time, now would be the time to do that. Mr. Humke.
Mr. Chair, I move the county version of the changes.
And I'll accept that motion and second that motion. Any further discussion amongst commissioners? Who said what? Oh, Mr. Humke.
I think the public should be informed. The county has taken the step, our fiscal staff has said, with all due respect to the Flood Management Authority, that is not a competent agency to accept these important funds. Perhaps there's a better term than that, but I don't mean to disparage the Flood Management Authority. That is one of the reasons I made that motion, is so that we can get off the dime and start rolling in this good old joint meeting where we are authorized to take this action. We need to move forward so that we can transfer the funds. It isn't that the county doesn't wish to transfer the funds. It is only that we perceive a fiduciary responsibility to all of these taxpayers to safeguard those funds. We are not in a good situation right now. Policymakers 3,000 miles east of here have looked with a skeptical eye to this, to these entities because they can't operate, and that's another reason I made the motion. I want to show that we're ready to go. Thank you.
Your motion, Ms. Young.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I stated earlier, I will not support this motion. I am one of your two members on the Flood Management Authority, and it simply because this does not solve anything in terms of the voting structure and our ability to move forward and make decisions. Thank you.
Now, your motion is about the voting structure, not the makeup of the board.
That's correct. It's as the agenda has specified, voting structure. Commissioner Brennan, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any comments, Commissioner?
No, I'm prepared to move ahead. I think that the whole concept of this effort to move ahead, I think fine having 6 members on the committee. I don't think the structure needs to change at all. In fact, I think if we were to change it, the county would get more votes because they have a larger assessed valuation and more people. But I think in the spirit of getting this thing done, this is the right way to go. So I'm supportive of the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Humke.
I was going to suggest I would accept that as a friendly amendment, but I'm not sure it was actually made.
It was not. Chair doesn't recognize this amendment. Any further discussion amongst commissioners? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Those opposed? Of 4 members of the Board of County Commissioners in favor, Madam Clerk, and Commissioner Jong as a no vote.
Thank you, sir.
Motion carries. Amongst the Board of County Commissioners.
City of Sparks.
What's the pleasure of the city of Sparks? Let me hear from the council. You want to take it back and let the attorneys go over it? Or are you prepared to make a motion today to approve this, Mr. Lawson?
Well, I have to agree with our attorney. I didn't get this package Friday afternoon late, so I didn't get to review it unless, until over the weekend. So although fundamentally it's not that big of a change, it's pretty easy to see what the changes are. But I just want to interject a little common sense here. Let's look at this from a business model. And if I'm the Corps of Engineers and I have 50 suitors out there that want my money, that want me to bless their project, and one of the suitors can't agree on anything, they kind of go to the bottom of the list. That's just a reality. So we need to get this thing straightened out. We need to get it straightened out in a hurry. We need to put our egos aside and do what's right for the citizens. And it's not going to be much longer. It's going to happen to us. I mean, the 100-year flood seems to come every 10 or 20 years. So we're burning up time right now. So with that, I will go with the pleasure of the Sparks City Council. But having read the addendum or the amendment to it, it's not that big of a change. I don't really see it as a major issue.
Who else? Mr. Carrigan.
Yeah, I think we should give time for our city attorney to take a look at it. But not that being said, you can see that there's somebody on the Flood Control Board voted no on this structure. I'm sure there's going to be somebody from the city of Reno voting no on this structure. And if it goes to the Flood Management Control Authority, it's going to get voted down. So I would much rather do it the way I asked in the beginning, than is have it go to the Flood Control Authority first and come to the entities. But that's just so I think our city attorney needs time to look at it.
So do we need a motion, Cheryl, or are you okay with that direction that we need to bring it back to you guys to look at it first?
Cheryl Leidy, on behalf of the City Attorney's Office, I believe at this time you could either defer the vote or you can, I'd prefer, I don't think we want to do a no vote on it at this point, but I think it needs to come back to City Council with a briefing.
You're good with that direction?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and everybody okay with Sparks City Council?
Can we get it on the next meeting, or is it too late?
Okay. Mr. Ratty? Okay. All right, you have, city attorney has direction. We'll take it back to City of Sparks. Thank you.
City of Reno, any motion or anything? Ms. Zedra? Mr. Guston? Mr. Guston?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I would defer to our city attorney also, because both the representative here and our city attorney, Mr. Kadlick, said that they wanted to take another look at it. So I would, the same action that the city of Sparks take, we would just defer it until we can bring it back.
As your city attorney, is this on the voting issue or the makeup of the board?
I think
if it's a voting issue, do you need it to come back?
John Cadlick, Reno City Attorney. I think we need to look at everything, and this is scheduled for this coming Wednesday anyway for discussion, I believe. So we'll have an opportunity. I think. Is it broad enough? I'm sorry. It's on the 25th agenda of the council. We'll have enough time then to look at it and discuss all issues, and I think that's in the best interest of the city at this point.
Mr. Isaac.
Well, I fully understand that the crosshairs are on me here, that I'm the one who's holding everything up, supposedly, but I want to make everyone aware. I brought up numerous issues to the Flood Management Authority about a few different items, and not once have they ever deemed it appropriate to even discuss the items I'm bringing up. They just had the vote yes or no. There's been no discussion at Flood Management Authority about the questions I brought up about the leadership of this authority or the makeup. So they want to just run around and change the rules rather than talk about the substantive arguments that I have been making. And that is how the acting director has been moving forward on projects. I've wanted to put stuff in his contract that would hold his feet to the fire to get things done. They've refused that. I'm not going to say they've refused it. They've refused to talk about it. And that's why I continue to vote no until the Flood Authority discusses these issues, which I believe need to be discussed. We can't keep doing the same thing for the next 10 years with the same people and expect different results. Something has to change somewhere, and that's where I am on this.
Okay. All right, so, yes.
You know, this flood project is a dysfunctional group right now. I'm not going to let Mr. Ayazi get away with some of the things he's saying. He said that I pulled an agenda item off of the agenda. I did. It was illegal. From our attorney, he pointed it out. One of the issues, Mr. Ayazi wanted to offer our executive director a contract for 4 months if he would set aside $10 million for the city of Reno. That's, you can call it blackmail, you can call it whatever you want, but that's what's going on here. You know, it's just, you don't offer a contract to an executive director with the condition that he set aside $10 million for your cities.
All right. So we have no motion. We're going to take it back. Same thing that the city of Sparks did. Okay. All right. Let's try to move on. Anybody got dinner ready for tonight? We'll now move to item number 7. Discussion potential directives to staff regarding the Community Assistance Center.
Good morning, Joe DeRoe, Goodwin Housing and Neighborhood Development Administrator for the City of Reno. Y'all are very familiar with this project, so we're not going to go over a lot of history. But in the past couple of years, we funded it through a pilot program that dedicated a share of property tax equivalent from each jurisdiction for the funding operations. At this point in time, that's really helped to stabilize the operation over at the CAC. We're looking at this point for a commitment from all 3 jurisdictions to do that formula again, 1/2 cent or 1 cent from Washoe County, 1/2 cent from each the City of Reno and City of Sparks. The staff report identifies what that equates to financially. And then, because that has been so helpful, we're looking to potentially just start the discussion related to a dedicated funding source going forward, which was the initiation of the pilot program a couple years ago. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions or discuss.
Mr. Humke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ma'am, at the staff report, it sets out that the funding structure is Washoe County 1 cent, ad valorem, City of Reno 1/2 cent, and City of Sparks 1/2 cent. Why the disparity?
That was actually what the staff was directed to do by all 3 jurisdictions at a joint meeting in 2009 prior to the 2010-11 fiscal year.
Mr. Chair, times have changed. I'm going to move that the county's authorization be cut by 50%. Thank you.
Mr. Isaac.
So the proposal was that all Washoe County residents would pay 1 cent in property tax, and all the residents in Sparks would pay 1/2 cent, and the residents of Reno would pay 1/2 cent, correct?
The equivalent of, yes.
Equivalent of. So of that 1% that goes to the county, 75 cents of that is already would be paid for by city residents, correct? I mean, 75% of the property tax comes from city residents. Close? So that would mean that actually the city residents would bear the brunt of this. Maybe not the City of Reno government, but the residents of Reno and Sparks would bear the most cost of this.
It's the largest share of the population.
Largest share, because we also, that 75 cents would come from the 75 of the penny. So out of 2 cents, 0.25 cents would come from unincorporated county, the way I do the math here. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yes. Mr. Schmidt.
I want to back on up there because I think there's a question that I'm going to be bringing up a little later on another subject. I want to make sure we're talking about this correctly. 1/2 cent property taxes, correct? From Reno and Sparks, and 1 cent from the county. Now, it's just I just need to make sure we understand, is that 1 cent coming from the county's general fund to begin with, or is it a 1 cent on their property tax bill? There's a big difference there.
Coming from the general fund, from the social services fund.
Ms. Simon?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For Councilman Schmidt, Katie Simon for the record. We transfer that from funds that we have in the social services fund, and so those are. It's a penny of tax rate that is already imposed, and we just divert it for this purpose. We spend about $30 million a year countywide on social services in that fund, and we use 1 penny of it, or about $1.4 million for this purpose.
But it's not a line item tax.
It is not a separate additional tax. We're using it for this purpose, and we can't use it for other region-wide purposes.
And Mr. Ayazi's calculations are correct.
And that was supported by this whole group here at a meeting. Mayor Martini said we treat animals better than we do humans. Yes, Mr.
Well, Mayor Kitchell, that's exactly what I was going to point out, is that a very different spirit was present at the table when we were talking about this last time, and that spirit was, let's all figure out how to get some money in there, and let's give each jurisdiction the flexibility to do that in whatever way they could, given the challenges of everybody's budget cycle. So I know we got creative and looked at how we did our CDBG and moved some things around to make sure that we could do it. I know the county got creative and figured out how they could do it, and I know the city of Reno got creative and figured out how they could do it. And so I'd like to make an effort here to change the tone and make a motion that we in the city of Sparks keep the rate at the exact same that it is now, because I don't think that the environment is ripe for an in-depth conversation on how we solve this problem for the long term, but I don't want to see us damage those the opportunities for those in our community who are least among us, who have the biggest challenges facing them, by changing up what's going on at the Community Assistance Center right now. So I would hope that this body could at least see its way towards maintaining the current level of funding until we have the opportunity to come forward with a long-term solution, which is what staff is asking for, but I'm not sure that we're going to get there today. So I'll make a motion that the city of Sparks maintain its current funding level.
Yeah, I had one motion already on the floor, but did it get a second from Mr. Humke, or was that a motion, Mr. Humke? It was. Do I have a second on Mr. Humke's motion from Washoe County?
Mr. Mayor, what was the motion?
The motion. Go ahead.
Was to reduce the county's portion to 1/2 cent from 1 cent.
Do I have a second for his motion? Dies for the lack of a second. Ms. Ratty, you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I apologize if I stepped on your motion. I didn't recall that. So I would like to make a motion that the city of Sparks maintain the current level of equivalency of 1/2 cent of property tax.
Motion, City of Sparks. Do I have a second? City of Sparks.
Second.
I have a second from City of Sparks. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimously. City of Reno, yes. Ms. Jones.
I have a motion as well, Mr. Chairman. No, on
This
behalf
is
of
a
the
county motion, excuse me.
Sorry, not on behalf of the city. I move that Washoe County continues to provide the 1 cent property tax to maintain the services at the Community Assistance Center.
I'll second that.
You have a motion second. Sorry to take over your meeting. All in favor, say aye.
Hold on. Excuse me.
Wait a minute. We got a comment.
Mr. Mayor, for discussion, I'd like to ask our manager, besides the 1 cent that we support this, the Community Assistance Center, how much does our Social Services Department commit to the same venue?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for Vice Chair Weber. Katie Simon for the record. I'd invite Kevin Schiller down, and he can give the details, but as he's coming down, we provide about 3 full-time equivalent staff people. And yes, we provide almost roughly $30 million of support to indigents that includes homeless people. Kevin can give you the details for the CAC.
Good morning. For the record, Kevin Schiller, Director with Washoe County Social Services, Chairman, members of the council, members of Sparks. To ditto what Ms. Simon has indicated, we have dedicated dollars in the tune of about $30 million in direct services that we are providing to support this population. To highlight a little bit about what's being discussed on the penny issue, we currently fund that through 50% of that cost coming from the Children's Services Division, the other 50% coming from the Adult Services side of the shop. We do provide 3 FTEs to support that case management. We also, what you would be familiar with in the old school world, which was general assistance or emergency assistance. We've also funded that as part of that $30 million and recently transitioned that to more of a transitional housing program. We are currently, I think I highlighted it in your staff report, are serving 30 direct client referrals from the CAC, and that was tied over to the performance outcomes within the current contract.
Thank you so much. Mr. Mayor, I am pretty amazed that none of that was included in the staff report. It's pretty interesting that $30 million may not be every cent going to the Community Assistance Center, but I think that there is a large portion of our staff time and financial support that goes to the Community Assistance Center. And so I therefore cannot support this motion because I think that when we're cutting across the board in every area in Washoe County, in every department, I can't support this motion.
Flipperelli?
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted, I don't know if you've still got a motion on the floor.
There is a motion.
Oh. Well, I thought Commissioner Weber made the motion.
No, Commissioner Jung made the motion. Commissioner Bretternett seconded the motion. To maintain existing one.
Okay. The agenda allows you to give direction to staff, so I assume that the motion is to direct staff to proceed with maintaining the funding level. Okay. Okay.
Any other comments from commissioners? Commissioner Hubbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The tone of the Social Services Director's report is that the county is contributing at an extremely disparate level already, even before this cash transfer. That is not a rationale for this cash transfer. We're doing it with this existing funds, working with the population at hand. Women, children, adults, and other family members. Thank you.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion amongst commissioners? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion? Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes with Commissioners Weber and Humke in the no vote. Commissioner Bretternett, you did vote positive since you seconded it?
I voted yay on that motion.
I'm sorry, yay or nay?
Yay.
Yay. Thank you. Motion passes with the notation, Madam Clerk.
City of Reno. Oh, excuse me. City of Reno.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'll go ahead and make a similar motion that the City of Reno maintain its existing funding levels along with the grant money.
Have a motion, second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose, no. Motion carries unanimously. All right.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just make a comment, because I was going to hold my comments to the item number 9, but I think it's relevant to 7, 8, 9 for everyone to go back and take a look at. And I know taxes sometimes look at a lump sum. People don't understand where taxes come from or where they go to. And I think it's very important for the residents of the incorporated areas to understand that a third of their property tax bills basically go to the counties, to the general fund of the counties. And those services that incorporated residents are bulk services that the whole county gets. So there is this question of Mr. Ayazi's funds of how it's brought into the system and how it's spent. And really thinking about the reverse of that is what items are specific to incorporated areas for those funds. They're not specific to the unincorporated area. And that's where the big disconnect comes in. And understanding, very, very complicated. I had a 3-hour discussion on an airplane last night with a new resident of northern Nevada that just moved in from Boston, because they were so confused on the tax structure of the state of Nevada all the way down to local governments. And this is one that I think it's time for us to all step back. I know we spent a lot of money in 2002 looking at studies of where taxes came from and where they went to on the local government level. I think it's good for all of us to refresh ourselves that huge amount of the county budget is come from property taxes associated with incorporated residents. Thank you.
Okay. Now we'll move on to item number 8.
Again, Jody Royo, Goodwin Housing and Neighborhood Development Administrator for the City of Reno. And this item is somewhat new to you, but very tied to the Community Assistance Center. The West Care Community Triage Center is located on the campus and for 4 years has been providing stabilization services to medically assisted stabilization services for those individuals who are recovering from substance abuse and or trying to be stabilized for a psychiatric condition. At this time, or previously, the CTC has been funded through a formula that includes 2/3 of hospital and local jurisdiction funding matched by 1/3 of funding from the state of Nevada through adult mental health services. The hospital funding contract has expired as of the end of 11/12. And so at this point, there's been a proposed budget with attached to your staff report related to recommended funding streams or potential funding streams, which includes, again, that match. So 1/3 from the local jurisdictions, 1/3 from the hospitals, and 1/3 the state matching funds. We're just looking to see if there is some desire and or direction from the 3 jurisdictions related to a commitment to funding for this activity.
Mr. Umke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ma'am, you said there was something attached to the staff report. I have here a 1-page staff report. Mr. Chair, at this time, I move this item be continued. All the materials were not distributed. I'm not going to accept that. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Azzi.
I want to discuss hospital funding on this. Theirs went away, and they were funding it because of the bonding commitments that they had with the city of Reno, if I'm not mistaken, when they refunded bonds. And
that's not the only reason they were doing it.
Well, also because you sweet-talked them.
No. They under the state had passed a statute that they had to do something, and then we got them to do it. And they were renowned, and all the hospitals agreed to work with us.
Well, and that's I had a conversation with one of the hospitals, and they said that wasn't paying off for them. Because we all thought up front, by doing the triage center outside of the emergency rooms, that everyone would save money, because we know that the county has to pay for them if people go to the emergency rooms. And so by treating them here, we would save money. Has there been any analysis done to see whether that's actually true or not?
We actually have representatives from West Care here that could speak to that better than I could.
Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Amy Rookie. I'm the Regional Vice President for West Care. I currently operate the Triage Center down on Record Street, and we'll on to those questions. We have done a significant analysis in combination with working with local partners to what we do versus what the hospital does. A number of the services that we provide are in lieu of the emergency room. The majority of the referrals that we get are self-referrals because they have come from the emergency room in the past to us, and we've changed behavior in that they come to us directly. I just pulled the report for March. We admitted 136 people. They stayed an average of between 3 and 5 days. Every day that they stay at the triage center, we are not only medically stabilizing them, but we're connecting them with community resources, housing, treatment services, food, clothing, shelter. And in that community collaboration, we're working with Washoe County Social Services and other community partners, and we're actually getting them housed. So a number of that serial inebriate population that you've seen in the corridor downtown, you've seen on your local sidewalks, they're not there. Same with Tent City going away. It's because we've got a number of people housed, and the Triage Center plays a huge role in that. We stabilize them before they go into that housing, and if someone relapses, we bring them directly back to the Triage Center rather than having them end up in the emergency room or on the streets or in the jails and with law enforcement. So I believe we are very effective. One of the concerns that Mr. Ayazi has brought up is relevant to the hospitals, and I've been spending a lot of time with Nevada Hospital Association as well as the hospitals and the CEOs of the hospitals, and what we're seeing is we are working on a shift from getting them directly dropped at the triage center versus law enforcement and REMSA taking them to the ERs, because we can now perform the medical clearance as well. So we are working with local government as well to get them directly to us. There will continue to be intoxicated people arriving in the emergency rooms. There's no way around that, but I believe we're very effective.
But has there been any analysis on just the dollar figures about if these 136 people were to go to an emergency room, how much would that cost the hospitals, whatever government has to pay for that, the state of Nevada, the Washoe County, where we could do the business model to say it's cheaper for us to spend $1 at the triage center than $2 at the hospital. Has that been done?
It has on a number of levels. One of the larger reports was related to the serial inebriate population, where we saw over a 12-month period of time, there was a $6 million cost to the community and the hospitals versus for the triage center a $1 million cost. So you're saving a huge amount of money by having them come there. These 136 clients costs us approximately $300 for us to treat a patient per day. And if they're in the hospitals, those charges are generally between $1,500 and $2,000 a day, if not greater, for the services that we provide.
Thank you.
Ms. Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have another question, but I don't think that you are the appropriate staff person. It might be Mr. Schiller. And while you're walking down here, Mr. Schiller, how much money, okay, the first question is, with this population, what is the likelihood that they have private insurance to satisfy the hospital's billing program?
For the record, Kevin Schiller, Director, Washoe County Social Services, members of both councils and the commission, to Commissioner Jung. This population is primarily being served here almost 99.9% of the time is uninsured and qualifies under our indigent population.
Right, and then who pays for the hospital bills if these citizens are admitted to the emergency rooms?
Typically in that process, you have a disproportionate share hospital, which primarily is Renown. St. Mary's is the second, and then Northern Nevada is fairly minimal in that process. We do go through an eligibility process with those hospitals. Those bills are submitted to us, and we provide payment based on that eligibility. To give you a sense, as numbers are being asked about emergency rooms, to Mr. Ozzy's question, primarily when we look at that, if I just isolate that to kind of the emergency component, we average about a $3 to $4 million expenditure just in that area. And that's not including as people are screened through the ER and then go into longer term processes. So we've really tried to utilize the CTC in the last year to year and a half to try to collaborate to move towards that. And then I think the other component that's important to be recognized is when we talk about medical clearances, what that process is doing is basically when law enforcement responds on a call and they're dealing with somebody who's intoxicated or mentally ill, what we're trying to do is move the CTC in the middle of that, because what it does is save law enforcement time and allows for us to respond better collaboratively. And obviously, selfishly, the ability for the CTC to serve that is going to reduce our costs as we move forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Schiller. So taxpayers, the whole county pays for the indigent population.
Yes, and I think as Ms. Rookie indicated, I think one of the issues we're consistently struggling with in our budget is how we manage those cost savings and those reductions in the indigent population with the hospitals. And we're in the process right now of trying to look at how we serve that population, how we adjust rates so that we can be in the black.
And when we pay the hospitals these indigent funds, is it at the rate in which they are billing their clients with the means to pay for?
The typical process is a billable charge process, and we pay a percentage of those billable charges, and we've continually reduced that to manage those costs. I'll be going before our board in the coming week to moving towards a validated rate, which will be Medicaid rate structure. which will have an impact on what we're paying out in terms of those costs.
Positive or negative to the hospitals?
I will be negative to the hospitals. We will be.
So they're losing money also when they send us bills for the indigent population?
What will happen in the Medicaid rates is that validated rate structure will have a direct financial impact primarily to Renown at this time.
And before we moved to that rate, did we pay at the level that Renown demanded?
We paid at the percentage of whatever their bill charge was.
What's that percentage?
I believe at this point, I think Mr. Redderas here, 40% of billable charges is what we're currently paying.
So they don't capture 60% of their charges?
Correct.
That they, okay, so why aren't the hospitals here funding this? Because it seems like their third share actually is cheaper for them in the long run.
And there's been lots of dialogue on that with the local hospitals. I guess the primary issue I would isolate that to is when we've talked to the hospitals, they've been trying to analyze, back to Mr. Ayazi's question, in terms of how are clients circulating. When you get into that serial inebriate population, or I'm just going to call them the hardest clients, there's two levels to that. The CTC can manage up to a certain degree of that.
When you say CTC, what does that stand for the public?
The Community Triage Center, sorry. As we circulate, some of those clients are going to come in and they can address that on the initial triage level, and then it ramps up. I will tell you, in analyzing the data, we have talked to the hospital about the significant cost savings when we've looked at that. And obviously, as the payer of those indigent bills, we're advocating for that. I mean, I believe if we can encourage the hospitals to be a provider in that, we need to continue to move towards that so our community can be more efficient with the taxpayer dollar.
Thank you, Mr. Schiller.
Ms. Reddy.
Mr. Schiller, I think you're probably the appropriate person to answer this as well. So my recollection of the initiation of this project was as a pilot to test to see if we could make some impact on the hardest clients to serve and at a lower cost, community-based way. And so I guess my real question for you is, I think what we do over and over again in the state of Nevada is we stand up a human services program. We want to do a pilot, but then we don't give it the time to really see, can it be effective as we build that partnership? And so my question for you is, has this pilot, because I believe that's what it is with a 20-bed facility, had time to prove itself or not?
For the record, Kevin Schiller, Director of the Washoe County Social Services. I guess to answer the question in terms of have we given it time, I will tell you as a Social Services Director dealing with this population and watching it, it is effective. I can sit before you and tell you it is directly effective, and as I said previously, from a selfish perspective in terms of what my dedicated taxpayer dollars are going to, it's an efficient way to spend those dollars. I think you have to go back historically also to when this program was initiated. The whole idea around it was that medical clearance component for the mentally ill and the severely chronic clients so that we could find a way to better serve them, whether that's a holdup when we're dealing with the state of Nevada mental health or whether we're dealing with how we get them through the hospitals. This is part of a community engaged process, and I think part of what the struggle is, and I just throw out there, is as budgets have reduced, it's become much more difficult to be positive in terms of how we fund everything. As you know, in social services and when we're dealing with the indigent, that's a core service that we have to deliver. And so when I look at the CTC and working with them, and when I work with the other jurisdictions, what we're really trying to do is from a hospital component as well as from our component, everybody else's component, to try to figure out how do we efficiently spend that dollar. Does it mean that every client is diverted away from the AR? I would tell you no, but I would tell you that from the perspective of how we triage them, how we get them services, and how we save money, I am seeing that in my budget and see the direct impact of that. The staff report that's before you, I did outline, we are projected to spend about $190,000 right now through the end of the fiscal year. That $189,000 is for direct medical costs, which I can tell you would equate over to an emergency room cost, which would be hugely increased from that cost.
And I would suggest, I think there have been some new layers that have been added on in terms of training the community about where to bring these offenders, or not offenders, excuse me, folks who are in need of social services, so that we are adding, each year we are adding things that tweak it and make it a little bit more effective. I think this agenda item, as well as another one that we're going to look at in terms of senior services, are great examples about where we're trying to be pound wise and penny foolish, flip that and not do the thing that we always do, which is not provide the less expensive upfront care and then allow people to get to the most expensive part of the system. And so I'm a big fan of this particular project, and I think that you all need some time to make your case, because I will agree with Commissioner Humke that it wasn't in the staff report. I don't think that the compelling information that we needed to demonstrate that spending this money now will save us significantly money in the long run. And if at this point we can't get that in raw data, but we can get some of the anecdotal pieces which you're talking about, I'd like to see us take a serious look at this, because again, it's cheaper up front. This is a community-based solution that is much cheaper than emergency rooms, indigent care, and as we get to senior services, talking about long-term housing. So if we can figure out how to get that compelling information out, I think it's important.
For the record, Kevin Schiller, Director with Washoe County Social Services. The only thing I would add to that, we started about a little over a year ago, having collaborative meetings looking at where the Community Triage Center budget was headed. That was between all the jurisdictions. And one of the things we did work on is we were able to provide a match to the state. So they were able to step up and provide as a partner a significant contribution to that. And certainly we can follow up and give you the details of that so you know what those efforts have been.
And that was going to be, that was going to be my next question. So we don't know where the hospitals are at this point on their $500,000. Do we know where the state is on their $500,000?
My understanding currently is the state is using that match and going to continue to fund going into the next fiscal year.
Okay, so we believe the state funding is secure. We still need to find out if the hospital funding is secure.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Humke.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That last part by Councilwoman Ratty was my question. The staff report seemed to imply to me, I'm sorry, I didn't go to the Washoe County School District to learn to read, so maybe that was a problem. Seemed to imply that the state was withdrawing their funding or reducing their funding.
I'd have Ms. Rookie come down and address that directly. We provided our match to assist with that. The other thing, as you know, Commissioner Humke, the other issue is from a state perspective, as we approach the legislative world, I mean, as we talked earlier about, we have several pass downs that occurred in the last session that are having a direct impact on our budget. I would have to put it on record that there's always a question mark as to where that funding is going to be stable and where it's not, especially as we approach the second year of the biennium.
And for the record, Amy Rookie, Vice President for the Western Region for WestCare. In response to your question, we currently have funding secured for the next 2 years through the state, through this biennium. We also have had several conversations with the hospitals, and I will tell you, although no commitment's been made, my understanding from the conversation from the CEOs is if the jurisdictions put in their part, I think they will be willing to put in the other third. As the intent was in the original legislative session, I believe in 2006 or 7, the conversation was that would be funded through the three-legged stool. The hospitals would fund 1/3, the jurisdictions, local municipalities, as it happens in Clark County, would fund 1/3, and the state would fund the other third. So that's where we are today, is actually going back to the original intent of the legislation.
So if it wasn't 3/3, what has it been?
The hospitals have picked up the share that previously was designated as the local municipalities. There was a $700,000 annual amount coming from a combination of St. Mary's and Renown.
And so has the state always been there with their third?
Yes, they have.
Thank you. Further question of Mr. Schiller. I guess it's crystal ball time, and we're approaching a legislative session. The state has not been bashful about taking Washoe County funds in the area of medical programs. What result in this one? Do you think the state will withdraw their funding once we start in this new budget year?
For the record, Kevin Schiller, Director with Washoe County Social Services, to Commissioner Humke. Based on what I know in their budget specific to this, my understanding currently is that it is funded, and that's what I'm being told. The only thing that I would put on the record, as I just allocated earlier, we are, in terms of the jurisdiction, in terms of social services, we are funding, when I list that $189,000, that's direct service dollars coming out of our indigent budget, in addition to what we're providing to the Community Assistance Center. The reason I highlight that is those legislative pass downs that come in and hit my budget, we're projecting currently, in the session, we were projected to have about a $3 million hit. We're approaching $6 million, and we're dealing with that issue currently. So In this specific line item, my understanding is that it's solid. But again, I want to make sure to put on record, everything impacts everything else. So the reality is, in terms of those legislative pushdowns and reductions, just in current billing, I could see an impact where I might have to come before you and say, fund this at this level.
So we could either make a conditional motion on the county's behalf or just wait and change the budget later if the state does what they normally do to us.
That would be correct, Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can just go ahead and recap on how I understand the process of what's happened, is that this is a state of Nevada legislative unfunded mandate to Washoe County.
Cattle for the answer. Jody Royal Goodwin for the record. It's not an unfunded mandate. If we don't operate it, we just lose the $500,000 that's committed to the operation. So they're saying, you're going to operate it already, we're going to support that. If we don't support that, they're not going to support it either.
I'll rephrase my question. It's a 2/3 unfunded mandate. You
could say it that way, I guess.
Okay, so if we don't fund it, it doesn't get done, but they don't fund 100% of it.
Correct.
And in order to balance their budget, they took these costs and put them on the residents of Washoe County.
That's, I think, in terms of...
Let me help. Again, Amy Rookie for the record. The state provides a match to what was defined as a need in the community. This originated in Southern Nevada based on the crisis in the ERs with the overcrowding, with the behavioral health clientele, substance abuse and mental health. This is where it originated, and the CTC originated the Community Triage Center in the South. There was a need identified to do a similar activity in the North, and that was identified in this community prior to my time. And so, as I understand it, Ms. Leslie was one of the people who initiated the fact that the state would provide the match to what the locals would put in to assist the local community. It isn't the inverse. It just happened to occur in the South, and it was decided by a group other than myself that it was going to be a good activity to replicate in the North, to be the intermediary, the safety net for the uninsured in this community, to keep them out of the regular systems of care when they really just needed a 24-hour emergency place to go when they're substance abusers or mental health with no resources.
If I just go ahead and follow, continuing the line of issues, the chain of command or the chain of reaction, how this has happened. It's becomes a state mandate, 1/3 funded, 2/3 local funded. And it's my understanding that the hospitals picked up that 2/3, if I'm correct, because it was going to save them money in the long run to pick up that 2/3. Is that correct?
It is correct that they were intending to save money by not having this clientele in the emergency room.
So after this length of time and this experiments, they've determined that it does not save them money. And so now they want the taxpayers of Washoe County to pick up those costs that they're not saving.
I don't believe that that's correct. I believe they are saving money. I believe that there's a lot of contributing factors to them still seeing this population in their emergency rooms, which again, EMTALA, as you know, is a reason why they will show up and have to be treated in the emergency rooms based on law. Beyond that, I believe that law enforcement, as well as REMSA and other people in the community who see that this is a place that these folks can go rather than the emergency room, all save money. They don't end up in the jails when possible, because then the jail also, as a county entity, saves money. The city of Reno and the city of Sparks, their police officers bring us clients directly, and again, saves time and money by bringing them to one local place.
And I think that's where Ms. Ratty and Mr. Humke's comments about lack of data brings up all these questions, because for me, I want to know how much Renown and Washoe County are saving for their $700,000. They're saving $20, $30 million a year in emergency care, and they're back here saying, well, we want you to pick up 1/3 of that, and that's going on to the taxpayers, which is an unfunded mandate. We've got a lot of explaining to do. We really have to sit down and analyze this thing. And as council knows, I'm a numbers type of guy. I want to see the numbers on it, and that's not there. So I really do think this item needs to be vetted a whole lot more before you pass on additional cost under the county residences, in this case, the City of Sparks residents.
Mr. Humke, excuse me, Mr. Guston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very briefly, I understand the recent comments, the comments here about understanding the financial structure of this model. I totally believe in this model, and anecdotally telling you that Father Joe down in San Diego, they did a study down in San Diego. I'm glad you're nodding. I'm glad you're familiar with that, showing the tremendous amount of savings that could be had by a triage center and taking care of the, especially the serial inebriate. A serial inebriate is a huge problem across the country, and some of you may be familiar with the $1 Million Maury story in Washoe County. And so when you look at this model, it makes an awful lot of sense. You have to break the cycle of recidivism, and this is a model that helps do that. So however this is going to be funded, I understand the questions, and rightfully so. You need to look at the numbers and how they shake out. But this is a model that I would plead to everybody not be forsaken, because it truly does work. And when you talk about saving money, you need to save it at the beginning, not at the end. You talk about, and I know Dr. Morrison is extremely familiar with this, about offenders in the penal system. If you can get them at an early age, you don't have to pay for them later on. This is a different way to look at this, and the triage model works tremendously well. And I again refer to you, and maybe some information can be brought to those members who are asking about it, about what happened in San Diego and how effective that program ended up being. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
For the record, Kevin Schiller, Director with Washoe County Social Services. The only thing I wanted to add, to give it some perspective, I want to use the term continuum of care, because I think as you look at these numbers and you evaluate this, one of the key components of this, I talked earlier about how we moved from a cash assistance, emergency assistance process to a transitional housing component. So we have clients being directly referred out of the community assistance center, which become part of that transitional housing. In our old practice, when you came in and applied and were deemed eligible for cash assistance, you got a cash check. Was there an outcome tied to that cash check? Fairly minimal in terms of what do we do for that client. So in the continuum of care, where I would define the CTC is you have the community assistance center, you have transitional housing, you have the cadre of social services, and the CTC becomes a component of that in terms of how we triage and how we best serve those clients in terms of process. And I think as the dollar becomes tighter, what we're finding is that we need to maximize that further. That serial inebriate piece is no different than disquantifying that these are our hardest clients. So how do we serve them the best?
It's ready.
I just want to quickly, respectfully disagree with my colleague in saying that this is a mandate. The definition of a mandate is that you are required to provide this service, and we are not going to give you any money to do it. And this is exactly the opposite of this. You're not required to do it, but we're going to invest in it if you're willing to invest in it. That's the message that we got with this particular program. And I understand we're operating in a bigger context where there are money, dollars being taken away here and invested there. I get that. But the reality is this is a proactive, collaborative, and we keep saying we're all going to work together to figure out how to solve these problems, but then when it comes time to do it, all we want to do is pull it apart. So this is some place where we are making progress. It's working. It's working in other communities. It's saving taxpayer dollars. We can demonstrate it, I think, if we take the time to do that. It's not going to be a line drawn because, as everybody knows, the need has increased significantly since the time that this project was started. But I'm with Councilman Guston on this. We have got to figure out how to maintain the funding for it and be a good partner to the state and the hospitals so that we can continue to do this and save taxpayer money by investing and catching these when they're a less expensive cost. And I want to commend Mr. Schiller, Ms. Royal Goodwin at the City of Reno, and and Ms. Rookie, because they're putting their creative minds to solving some very challenging problems and not just doing it the way we always have, which is hand out assistance but not take people off of that assistance and move them into being able to be on their own and able to take care of themselves, which is what we need to do if we're ever going to solve these issues. Thank you.
Mr. Hatchef.
First, I want to agree with the comments that were made by Councilman Guston and Councilperson Roddy. I think this is a great program, and it saves us money, and it's done wonderful things. But the one point I want to make sure we're clear on, or at least I understand, the state doesn't fund unless they see the local match, right? So to me, it's critical that we move forward, otherwise we lose the state funding.
That is correct.
And then it's also, what is staff looking for? I mean, when I read the staff report, are you looking for, it sounds like you still have some work to do with the hospitals. Are you looking for direction for us to basically say we're going to find a way to provide the local match so you can go back to the hospitals and get their commitment?
For the record, Jody Railgun, and I think it's the latter that we're looking for. Is there a desire on behalf of the jurisdictions to fund it and then direct staff to go figure out how to make that work and come back to you with the final plan?
And then the local match for the 3 jurisdictions would be the 500, correct?
And it would be contingent upon the 500 from the hospitals as well.
Correct. Okay.
Ms. Weber?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to share that I really support all of this, and I think that we need to consider that this really comes and helps our local folks. I had the opportunity to drive to Gerlach with Ms. Rookie and some of our staff and hear some of the great stories of our clients, our local community members that have gone through, have been helped by this program, and I just really believe that we need to support this.
Mr. Isaac?
Mr. Schiller, you said that we have the hospitals and we're down to 40% of the billing, correct?
Correct.
Is that all the hospitals are 40%?
No, the primary hospital that serves the indigent is Renown. Between Renown and St. Mary's in Northern Nevada, that percentage is set for the hospitals and indigent costs, but to be clear to you, the 2 primaries tend to be Renown and St. Mary's, majority with Renown.
And what's the percentage, though? Is it 40% that the county refunds them on those bills?
Yeah, we review the bills for eligibility, and then based on the billable charge that is approved, we pay 40% of that cost. And
both Renown and St. Mary's?
Correct. And then it gets a little complex, but there's what's called a free care obligation. So Northern Nevada fits into that, but in many cases they kind of border on meeting that free care obligation.
From both hospitals?
They all have to meet their free care obligations before we pay.
The question I have, and I don't know whether it's been changed or whether it's been brought up, but going back into ancient history, when Washoe Medical Center was sold by the county, there was an agreement there that they would do indigent care for cost. There wasn't a profit figure put into that or not. Okay, what's the question there? You look like you got...
For the record, Kevin Schiller, Director with Washoe County Social Services. To be as clear as possible, and that's why I talked about it in my opening remarks on the billing, when you get into the world of billable charges, I'm just going to use the term validated rate. One of the issues that we've struggled with as we've seen more pressure come on us in terms of meeting this population and in terms of rising costs, back to your sense, is what is cost? The hospital has indicated that a Medicaid rate does not meet their cost. That's what they would quantify, and we've been in the process of trying to look at what that data looks like. What we're trying to do in evaluating our new process and effective in July would be a third-party vendor that uses Medicaid rate as the base validated rate, and then any percentage we adjust above that would be to help meet their need in terms of meeting that cost. As you might guess, there's thousands of cost centers in terms of how that's billed. So to answer your question and why you saw me kind of middle of it is it's hard to get down to what is cost and what's happening as you review that.
But then why I brought out Renown and Washoe Medical Center at the time, is it fair to make both hospitals pay the same amount when Renown got their hospital? I mean, that was the deal that they made, is we will provide this indigent care less than the other hospitals. So I could see where I'd have pushback from the other hospitals at the 40%, because we didn't make the great deal that Renown got.
For the record, Kevin Schiller, Director of Washoe County Social Services. Renown would argue to you that currently, in being the largest server of the indigent, that they're having the most financial impact based on that and not getting their costs back. We pay the same rate. Maybe I need to be clear on that. When we get a bill from St. Mary's versus Renown, it's the same rate, that percentage.
Well, and that's what I mean. So their cost, and I think that's what needs to be discussed with Renown, their cost would include their bond rating and this new tower they built and all that, but that shouldn't relate to the cost of providing indigent care. I think there's some conversation there that needs to be had with Renown. And I don't know who actually does those negotiations, whether it's the county or you in particular, but I think that Renown should be on the hook more than any other hospital because of the deal they made with the county 30 years ago.
And for the record, Kevin Schiller, Director of Washoe County Social Services, I guess I would add to that, In terms of redefining 25 years of past practice and being at the table with Renown, what we're really trying to do is get down to the bottom line of what's that cost. I would say to everybody, the issue in terms of what is happening at a national level, if you look at other states, they have primarily shifted from billable charges to a Medicaid rate structure. So in many states, you'll just have a Medicaid rate with no percentage above that. In other states, they're trying to work with that. That has become kind of the standard of practice for the indigent population. The issue becomes if the hospital came to us and said they could not meet that need, just so I'm clear with the boards, the issue is we still have an obligation in that serving that indigent population. It doesn't go away. So we have worked on what are the other ways that we would deliver that service if they said it didn't make business sense for them anymore. And being the primary funder of those hospital costs and those indigent costs, obviously we're trying to figure out how we meet that mandate so that so our budget can be sustained and we don't lose services, back to the comments that made earlier.
My last comment would be, but I think in this instance why it's different is it's up to Renown to prove these are the costs. It's not up to the county to get Renown to go down and agree to it. It's the county's, it's Renown's obligation to prove these are the costs that we're incurring on this, in my opinion. So,
and I would add to, as I indicated, we have a board item coming up in approximately a week where we have essentially outlined through discussion with Renown what that Medicaid rate percentage is going to look like to try to figure out that this is the cost. And the bottom line at the end of the day is we can only pay what we can pay, and we have to have a sustainable budget. And to do that, we have to have a validated rate. So I appreciate your comments.
Ms. Zadra, excuse me, Mr. Hashef, did I call on you? Alzheimer's kicking in. Ms. Zadra and Mr. Lawson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Kind of a follow-up part of my question you've already covered, but what percentage of both hospitals, you clearly said that it's Saints and Renown that have the bulk of the indigent care, what percentage of their total care costs for each hospital goes to indigent care?
I'd have to get that data to you. I don't know, Ken, do you think you have that? I don't think we have that at our fingertips today, but we could get it for you.
And have we yet requested, or is this part of today's discussion, have we previously requested any kind of partnership funding from the hospitals for the triage operation?
For the record, Kevin Schiller, Director with Washoe County Social Services. About a year ago, we started conversations about the triage center and the budget. The representative for the hospital associations was at those meetings. We've also had individual discussions with the hospital representatives specific to the funding. One of the issues that comes into play, back to comments earlier, is looking at the hard data in terms of what is the cost savings for them. That's been an ongoing discussion. Because I'm the primary payer of those indigent costs, I can clearly outline where we see cost savings in terms of that process. I think there's some perspective that the triage center is going to remove any serial inebriate from being in the emergency room or somebody that's intoxicated or mentally ill. I think the way I would preface that is that we're trying to reduce that presence and create that process. To be honest, the law enforcement issue, which I talked about earlier, we started on this initiative about 3 years ago in terms of getting this in process, and we're just now getting to the point in the last year where law enforcement can be a primary player, where we're going to be able to take clients directly to the CTC or another location so that they can be cleared and not sit in the ER with a law enforcement officer. That was the whole intent, I think, as the mayor knows, in its passage to do that. And then what occurred is we had issues where there were barriers coming up in terms of licensure and process and where you could keep a client. So we're right in the midst of that, and I believe we're right on the cusp of making it successful.
Do you anticipate that there will be an impact, financial impact, in the assessments that you receive from St. Mary's with their pending or just finalized, I'm not sure exactly which it is, sale, and they will now be a for-profit operation? Do you see any kind of impact?
I guess I would just have to speak from experience in looking at, I've been involved in lots of discussions about what ultimately is going to occur, but in terms of them becoming for-profit, I would assume in terms of the process and where they're evaluating who they serve, there probably will be some level of impact in terms of costs based on their shifts. They have, I speak from the social services perspective, for the most part reduced all of their outreach programming. I would quantify CTC as an outreach program, as would Kids to Senior Corner, other programs that are community-driven. So one of the way I would answer that is that I'm seeing them go down to core hospital services versus the community outreach, and that's back to $1 spent in the front end saves $3 on the back end.
Mr. Lawson.
I have a few questions. One, when I saw the study in San Diego, it was presented to business owners. It wasn't funded by the local entities, if I remember correctly.
For the record, Kevin Schiller, Director of Washington County Social Services. I think the business partners were a member of that and a partner significantly in that. I also think there was some governmental funding that was tied to that. We do have business partners in our process, in our programming, where we shifted from our cash assistance to the transitional housing and to the programming. We have business partners at the table, and we have received some funding from them to assist in that.
Yeah, I remember it as a way to clean up the area, and the business owners in the San Diego downtown area were very much in favor of cleaning it up, so that's why this thing got started. The other part of this is, aren't the hospitals mandated to take people in?
Yes, and as I outlined earlier, that disproportionate share in that indigent service, there is a mandate for them to do that. What would occur, and it's a little complicated, is there's certain programs they are and certain programs they aren't. But in terms of showing up in the air, they can't turn somebody away from that perspective. But then when you get into what I would quantify outpatient costs or other costs tied to that, they do have the ability to shrink down what service they're providing, which in turn could have a direct impact on us because they circulate and those numbers go up. So they have the choice to participate in certain components of that, and so we would still have an obligation based on the share we receive in that dedicated money to make sure they have health care.
The problem that I have, and this smells entirely like a government subsidy to me, in that because the hospitals don't want to take care of the full process, now it's back on the citizens. And that we're going to put it back on all of our citizens in the entire Washoe County area for a problem that exists in one local area where the financial benefit for me is not as great in rural Sparks as it is in downtown Reno or downtown Sparks. So I just have an issue with that part of it, and I have an issue with the hospitals basically backing out of the deal and going that direction. So I think the idea in the study is wonderful. It's a great idea. I'm not real convinced that this is the correct method, the way to implement it.
If you're short of any, Mr. Lawson, I can send some over tomorrow afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have our own.
All right. Any other comments? What are we talking about? $150,000 apiece? Yes.
Just the cost. I mean, I understand where Councilman Lawson is coming from. It does save the hospital some money potentially, but it also saves the jurisdiction some money. Just the cost of a Sparks police officer sitting in an emergency room, unable to leave until certain boxes are checked. Just that cost savings alone, I'm pretty sure we can make the argument for why, as this moves to a place where that doesn't have to happen anymore across the board, whether it be our jurisdiction or any other jurisdiction, that the cost savings are there. So while the hospitals definitely have a part in this, it should be at the table, and I completely agree with that. It also saves taxpayer dollars, and that's why we should be at the table.
Any other comments?
Mr. Mayor, from the county standpoint, I believe there was a motion from Commissioner Humke to continue this item due to the lack of information from the staff report. Is that accurate, Mr. Humke? Is there a second to that motion for continuance? Hearing none, motion fails for lack of a second.
City Sparks?
I'd like to move to direct staff to work together with the other jurisdictions to figure out how to come up with our portion of a balanced investment and work with the hospitals to make sure that they're on board as well.
Have a second? I'll second it for discussion. What is our share?
Well,
I mean, how are we going to determine that?
I think what worked particularly well last time is when we kicked it back to staff. Staff got in a room. I think that Mr. Schiller, as well as several other folks came up with some creative solutions on how do we get to the last agenda item and how do we fund that. And I'd like to see our very talented staff put their heads together again and see what might work.
I think we'll still have an opportunity, if they can come up with a solution, we'll still have an opportunity at the council level to vote yes or no. But I think what Julia's getting to is let's look at it and see if we can find some solutions to this that are amenable to everyone. Lawson?
I would agree we need to look at it. I think we need to add one more component in this, and then let's look to the RDAs or business community to be of some type of assistance in this and not putting all the onus on the taxpayers.
I think that's already happening, is it not, Mr. Schiller? You're already looking into businesses to help out with this. Somebody's getting anxious.
You okay, Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I think that's already part of the discussion, Ed. Okay, any other questions from the city of Sparks? Mr. Schmidt?
I could support the motion if we pull out find the solution to participate in it. I think, to come up with the answers that we've asked here is, how much money is this going to be? How much money is this going to be? Where are the savings? Who's participating in the savings? How much is it truly costing the city of Sparks to begin with? I think, finding a solution to something we don't have all the answers to begin with, I think doing a report for the city council on what does this mean. That's my concern with the motion.
Any other comments?
Is the motion to just send it back to staff? Is that the motion?
I think so.
My motion is to send it back to staff to come up with a way to facilitate some investment from the local governments to match investments made by the state and by the hospital.
Okay, any other discussion before we get out of here? Okay, all those in favor say aye. Opposed? So that's...
You're the tiebreaker, Mr. Mayor.
I don't tiebreak.
That's
two.
There's 5 of us here.
There's 5 of us here, yeah. It's 3-2, it passes. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Don't try to tell me my job there, Larkin. Okay, we're done.
I wanted to see if you could add this morning. Is there a motion, Commissioner Jung?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Same recommendation as the Councilman Raddy's.
Second. Is there discussion? Is there Commissioner Humke?
Mr. Chair, I think it's premature for a motion. I think there's too many unanswered questions. The big void in the room is the absence of hospital participation in this very fine joint meeting here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Humke. All those in favor of the motion? Aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. That motion passes 4-1 with Commissioner Humke as a no vote.
Ms. Edra.
In motion for the city of Reno, Mr. Mayor, with the understanding, I believe I heard Julia in the motion, that there will be direction to staff to involve the hospitals in participation.
Second. Have a second. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Motion carries unanimously. Hey, John, the only reason I asked you if you're feeling good, this machine keeps going, brrrr.
It's my stomach growling.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, feed it.
Well,
It's almost 1 o'clock where I am.
Score is. Oh, somebody was questioned what the score is.
They don't tip off till 8:30 tonight.
Okay, that's good. All right. Now we will go to item number 9. Oh, no, you don't get out this early. This meeting's on. Item number 9. Update status report on regional animal service proposed tax rate adjustment. Yes, ma'am, you're up.
Good morning. For the record, Sherry Mendez, Washoe County Finance Director. I've been asked to give you an update on the status of the tax adjustment that was discussed beginning back in September of 2011 between Regional Animal Services and the county's general fund. So a real brief report is that the county is no longer looking to make that adjustment. The Washoe County Manager, Katie Simon, and myself are not proposing that tax adjustment be made, and it will not be included in the county's budget for fiscal year 12-13. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any question? Mr. Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We've $5-point-something million in reserves. What's the planned use for those funds?
I'm not sure I have the answer to that today, but the reserves certainly could be used for capital spending going forward, or to increase animal services as far as or that kind of thing on a going forward basis. I mean, certainly property taxes are declining. We are expecting another 3% decline in property taxes going forward into 12-13. The Incline Village refunds had an impact on the fund as well. So, you know, potentially on a going forward basis in at least the next couple of years, there's a possibility that their revenues will not be enough to cover their expenditures, which will chew into reserves somewhat.
We don't have any forecast of that right now, what the next 2 years look like with baseline funding, how much money sits in there for the 2 years from now.
We are projecting that property tax revenues are going to decline by 3% next year. Going forward, you know, we'll look forward we're going to be doing 3-year plans in the county that will be due by all departments in December. So, you know, we'll have all of that data as far as what the Animal Services Fund or department is planning to do with those funds. They'll be bringing that forward when they do their 3-year budget plans.
My question is, if we as a governed body are charging a tax, raising a tax, and spending what we think is necessary, and there's $5.5 million, whatever that number is, sitting in an account that we've known for excess of 10 years that we're overcharging for the services we're providing, and we've built up a fund, what is the responsible thing to do with that fund? Is it responsible just to say, well, we're going to keep it in reserve in case we go down? Or is it responsible to let the taxpayers know that they've overpaid for the service and find a way to get that money back to the taxpayers? Is it responsible to adjust the tax rate today for the services that we are going to provide for it? Or is it responsible to say, no, we're not going to do anything and continue putting the money in the fund?
Ms. Simon?
Mr. Mayor, if I might respond to Mr. Schmidt's excellent comments. Washoe County Manager Katie Simon, as you all are aware, the Animal Services Department is now under the authority of the Washoe County Sheriff's Office, and one of the first things that the Sheriff's Office did was to request an internal audit. They have been working on that internal audit. It is not complete, but I know that there are representatives here from the Sheriff's Office, and they are we'll be looking at that information, service levels, et cetera, to determine what, if any, adjustments they want to make in the funding for animal services in the future. And again, in order to raise that tax again, once it might be lowered, the Board of County Commissioners does have the authority to lower the tax, but it would require a vote of the people to raise it again. So all of those decisions would be made with a great deal of public debate. I would offer, if anyone from the Sheriff's Office wants to respond to Mr. Schmidt's question.
For the record, Under Sheriff Todd Binger, Washoe County Sheriff's Office. We have requested that an audit be done of the entire animal control. We want to take a look at all the budget items. We do know that the projections for revenue is going to be declining over the next year or more. We also need at this time to start looking towards some of the positions that were eliminated and considering those, as well as some of the infrastructure within the building that's starting to decay that may need to be replaced, as well as some of the equipment that is timed out to be replaced.
So I guess my concern here is, or my question is, that with moving animal control to the Sheriff's Department, is that a cost savings move?
It would be cost savings only in the fact that the overhead management of it's covered under the sheriff's office. The budget itself has been stated many, many times is separately funded and separately balanced on the sheets as opposed to the sheriff's office. We don't commingle the funds. We don't move the funds from one to the other. They're separately accounted for.
So you say if we have this discussion in 2 years, we can show that the move from a separate entity to under the Sheriff's Department is a cost savings measure, that we should be able to provide animal control services at a cheaper price 2 years from today than we do today. Is that your goal?
Our goal is to look at the most efficient way to provide the service to the people of Washoe County. We haven't had enough time yet to be able to look through every aspect of animal control to find the most efficient processes in every form within the organization.
So hopefully we're not sitting here 2 years from now that the most efficient form of animal control costs the residents of Washoe County more money. We're not looking at as we hope that that's not going to be an outcome.
No, I don't see it costing any more money in the fact that our revenues are projected to go down, so it would have to operate under a lower revenue.
And the reason why I ask these questions is 10 years ago when we did this, this was a form of consolidation with the governments. This was a form of cooperation of all three governments for tax incentive. And, you know, we've kind of caught off guard on this whole thing. And I think that there is some reporting that needs to be done to the local bodies, government bodies, on how these funds are going to be used and what the future is. I know we haven't asked for anything in the last 10 years. The only thing we get is when we get a phone call, how fast it's being responded to by our citizens. So I think now that we're in a situation where we have excess funds on something we all agreed upon on how to fund it, that we all have an ability to at least be notified on how these changes are being made. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure if this is for you or the budget side of it. There have been, for all of us, cuts across the board from all of our departments to balance our budgets over the last several years, and the Animal Services Department has taken those budget cuts as well. Will those continue when there's the known balance, positive balance? Will the same kinds of cuts continue if cuts are taken from all departments in the future budgets?
Well, to the extent that we are still seeking, concessions from our employee groups, they would get cut for that. But the Animal Services Fund is going to take a hit to its revenues, and we'll have to reduce spending or make some decisions around how much of that fund balance or reserves that they're going to want to use on a going forward basis. Certainly, using the reserves ongoing without looking at a cut in spending is not sustainable over the long term, but that would be up to the department to make those choices. So, as revenues decline, and they do get property tax revenues, they are going to have to make some of those decisions, yes.
Again, there's the $5 million balance sitting there. Do you anticipate that as cuts are proposed for this and this year, we'll talk this year specifically, do you anticipate that that department that is sitting on a significant reserve will also be cut? Will you maintain the equal cuts per department?
We have direction from the board to do across the board, by fund, by department cuts. So currently that sits at 4.5%. Makes sense in the Animal Services Fund to do that, given the fact that they are going to have a 3% decline in property tax revenues, along with the reduction as a result of the inclined village refunds. So, yes.
So even though there's a reserve, it's your estimation that a cut makes sense?
That's the direction we have been given by the board.
And was there, has there been, as part of the audit potentially, is it just a financial audit or an operations audit that's occurring, was there some assurance that the best standards and practices that were presented when the agreement, the consolidated agreement, was initiated 10 plus years ago, or almost 10 years ago, or standards to be met, those issued by the Humane Society and other industry standards. Have those been achieved? Has there ever been an analysis, those lists that were provided when the Combined Animal Services was initiated? Has there been an audit that those recommendations were indeed implemented?
For the record, Todd Vinger. Our request for the audit was to audit the funds that are in the accounts, as well as the controls on all the funds and how those funds come in and out of the organization. Also at this time, we're looking at every form of the operation to make sure it's efficient within the guidelines of the federal standards, the guidelines within animal controls across the nation. It is considered one of the national leaders in animal control, and we wish it to stay that way. We also want to listen to bodies like this and the people and the Animal Control Board itself to run it in the way that you want to run a regional animal control shelter. I hope that answers the question. It's not just the Sheriff's Office making decisions about how animal control is run.
I understand.
It's up to this body and all the boards that govern animal control to determine that we stay within all the guidelines and the processes and the procedures set forth with animal control.
And I would express my gratitude to you for participating in the task force that is currently reviewing the operations and will be making recommendations. And maybe that's where some of the specificity to my prior question have already been examined. So again, thank you for that involvement. And I believe I heard you when I was there for a brief introduction, answering some questions to that group a few weeks back, that you indeed are looking forward to receiving the recommendations that will come to the City Council for your operations review as well, and potential implementation.
I don't know if that's the road runner, but it's the people's animal control, and we want to listen to the people and how best they want to run animal control. I agree with Commissioner or Councilman Schmidt in the fact that the best way to operate a regional function like this is in a consolidated format. And it's up to us to take care of the organization, but listen to the people and how they want it to run, and try to make it happen that way.
Thank you.
Mr. Lawson.
I think it's important that we back up and look at the motivation on the tax that took place. This has been overfunded from the word go. And the reason why was that there would be a fund balance, that somewhere down the road when this tax disappears, and I believe it's 30 years, that there would be maybe enough money to build another animal shelter at that time to upgrade the services. So I think it's a well thought out plan to begin with. I know it's tough in these economic times to see this pot of money sitting over here and we can't get our little hands on it. Well, that's not what it's for. I think they're doing a wonderful job. I think we need to continue to do what we're doing to keep regional animal services, but it was a good plan. And too often I think we forget to look at the history of why we voted. We vote to tax ourselves. That's pretty important in my mind, that we're taxed ourselves based on this overfunding, based on the fact that there will be some money left over at the end. I don't see any issue with that. Thank you.
For the record, Todd Vinger, I agree 100%. If you notice, if you look into the accounts, there's no capital account to move forward down the road. Any good business would set up some reserve. I don't know if we should be calling it a surplus. It should be a reserve or capital fund for things that deteriorate in the future, and when we do have to expand and do have to repair things or actually build an extension to the building itself.
Ms. Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, or Mr. Mayor, sorry. I just wanted to circle back in terms of what Councilwoman Zadra said. I did not support that direction to staff on the County Commission that we cut regional animal services with a large ending fund balance just because we're cutting everybody else. Clearly I was outvoted, but I do want that to go on the record. Secondly, I do have a question for the City of Reno, who put together this review of Animal Services Committee. When can we, as you're coming down here, Ms. DiCiano, I'll continue asking this, when does the council anticipate a receipt of their findings.
Good morning. For the record, Barbara DiCiano. We are scheduled to go before City Council on April 25th. We're meeting every week and condensing recommendations and going through a multitude of information.
Okay, great. And could we respectfully request that the entire bodies that are here today receive a copy of that as well?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Schmidt.
Just if I could clarify one question that Mr. Lawson has. Part of our cost right now that we're paying for on a yearly basis, is that not a bond for a brand new facility that's just a few years old?
Mr. Mayor, for Mr. Schmidt, Katie Simon, Washoe County Manager, there was a portion of the ballot question that went for bonds that was additional to the 3 cents. And Ms. Mendez, I believe we've paid off a considerable amount of that, but there's still there still may be bonded indebtedness on that.
For the record, Sherry Mendez, Washoe County Finance Director, those bond payments are not paid out of the Animal Services Fund. Those are paid from county funds.
I'm hearing two different things. There was a separate bond issue for operations and a separate bond issue for building. Is that correct?
Katie
And
Simon
building
for the-
is
yes.
now paid off or close to being paid off?
Katie Simon, for the record, the building is not yet paid off, but yes, there was 3 cents for operations and an additional amount for the bonds to build the facility, and we are still making debt payments from the county's debt service. Again, that's a separate designated restricted amount that goes specifically for that project.
Yeah, I would like to have staff then to go ahead and get us the report, because that was not in the original report of the bonding portion of it. Is my understanding the 3 cents covered the bonding and operations, so I need to see the numbers with the whole package of everything. Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion? Thank you very much. Do we need a motion on this? No. It's just an update. Now we have an update on the status of the Washoe County Senior Services Program. Then we'll take a 7-inning stretch. You're going too early, Mr. Martini. Yeah.
Good morning. For the record, Grady Tarbetton, Director of Washoe County Senior Services. You've asked for an update on the programs and services that we provide. Senior Services is a regional program. We serve every citizen in Washoe County, every senior citizen in Washoe County. We, of course, our mandate is from county code. And just to go down the list of that, adult day health services, a homemaker program, a legal program, a nutrition program, a representative payee program, social services, and facilities management. The one item that you'll see that's not included in those mandates is optional, and that's wellness services. As you can well imagine, with the budget situation we've had over the number of years, Washoe County cannot provide all the responsibilities in terms of meeting the needs of seniors. And I'd like you to think of senior services not in terms of what Washoe County does, but in all services for seniors in this community as a funnel that feeds those people who are most at risk to senior services. So at the very top of that funnel, where most people are, we have to have collaborative relationships. And we have collaboration from the city of Sparks and the city of Reno, and I would like to invite you all to join us for Older Americans Month. The kickoff celebration is April 30th. It's going to be at Neal Road, and it's at 11 o'clock to 3 o'clock. So we've been doing that collaboration for a number of years. And how do I advance the slides? Let's go ahead. Our mission is independence, dignity, and choice. Our optional services, as I mentioned before, is our wellness program, which for all practical purposes is done by Parks and Recreation, for both cities. Our mandated services are here, which I've just gone over. And then the way that people are served, or where they live. In 2010-11, this just most completed fiscal year, we served over 5,000 people. 67% of them have Reno addresses, 19% Sparks, 10% unincorporated, and then 4% are people, some guests from outside the county. These numbers have been pretty stable for the past 3 years. And the only change was when we had some ERA funds in fiscal year 2009-10 that expanded some programs in the Sun Valley GID. But other than that, our level of service in terms of percentage of the population is pretty much the same. We are facing a challenge, and in addition to our budget, is the population growth of seniors. And I'd like to remind everyone that this is actually good news. Back in 1900s, the average life expectancy was about 45 years. Today, it's into the 70s, and within the next 50 years, it will reach above 80. So this is good news for all of us. We've done a very good job in terms of public health, Social Security, Medicare, and other programs that have extended people's lives. The programs that we provide for Washoe County Senior Services are to keep people independent, keep them in their homes, keep them in the community. The next slide will show you that our budget over the past 4 years, including 2013, the increase in expenses and revenue in 2012 is primarily due to what, in terms of revenue, is a foreclosure mitigation program done by Senior Law, which we're transitioning to Nevada Legal Services at the end of June this year. The expenses are Incline Village payoff and also, at least our portion of it, and employees that voluntarily separated from county employment. Our accomplishments, we are focusing on the most vulnerable in the community. As you heard earlier about the triage center, there's similar strategies that can be used with seniors to keep them in their homes and bring in federal resources. And we have many partners, nonprofit agencies, Veterans Administration, the state of Nevada, and many nonprofit organizations. Our goal over the coming years is to really strengthen the network of services for profit, nonprofit, and county government and state government that serve seniors. There's many services that people can pay for themselves. They do not need county or state support, but we need to strengthen that network of providers so that they do a better job. Our accomplishments, one of the best ways for us to serve people is to make sure that they know what to do. I don't know how many of you have had to deal with Medicare Part D or other of the federal programs that have a lot of detail to them. We have a helpline that is a starting point for people in the community. It's called an Aging and Disability Resource Center. But it's the first place for people to start. Our programs have been just increasing like crazy. You'll see the data from year to year. But this goal, because of budget cuts, we projected serving 4,900 people. We are going to conservatively serve 5,800, which means that there's a lot of people on our waiting list for our mandated services. Now, those numbers do not include the classes and activities provided by the cities or for our many partners. We have an advisory board, Senior Services Advisory Board, that's appointed by the County Commission. There's 2 representatives from each district, 1 at large and 2 non-voting alternates, and then an ex officio member from each of the jurisdictions. In addition, we have joint meetings with the Reno Senior Citizens Advisory Council, quarterly meetings. We have one on Wednesday. And we work together on many things. One, for example, I gave you earlier, which is the Older Americans Month celebration. But in addition, the city has provided funding for a program called Temporary Assistance for Displaced Seniors, which is when a person is found in the community by a policeman, there's a place that they could go to, a group home, or the triage center that they can get assistance until we get a social worker connected with them. So we work together in those quarterly joint meetings on advocacy for seniors, coordination of services, and marketing, and many other things as well. Just quickly, this is the county code. It's on the county website, of course. But here's the responsibilities of the Senior Services Advisory Board. We have an MOU with both the City of Reno and the City of Sparks, interlocal agreements. The first one, City of Reno, was signed in 2003. It was updated for Neal Road. And then the City of Sparks agreement was begun in 1991, which is the building that Senior Services uses. It's operated by the city. And that was updated in 2011, as many of you remember. I won't spend a lot of time on this. This is how Senior Services as an organization is developed, is run. We have, if you look from the left side of the page, you have that funnel. And senior centers and our collaborative relationships are the big end of that funnel. You go to the right, you get down to the narrow end, social services, and then Daybreak Adult Day Health. And then just a little more information about those funding programs. Next, please. Our outputs, we try to prioritize our services to people that are the most vulnerable in our community, both in terms of whether they're at risk of being institutionalized or whether they're just poor or socially isolated. These are our percentages. What we accomplished in 2012 is the first column there on the far right, and then the targets for 2013. We exceeded our goals for the year. And this is, again, just quality measures for the people that use our services, both in Daybreak and in our congregate and home delivered meal program. And units of service. You'll notice at the bottom, you'll see that the average cost of a nursing home in Nevada is $78,000 per year for a shared room. That's private pay. The state of Nevada is $60,000 is about what the state pays. Washoe County Adult Services pays a portion, about half of a number of those clients. So the work that we do in these programs prevents people who could stay at home, gives them the resources and the support to stay at home. We've been serving more people over the past several years, and we expect those numbers to continue. Our long-term goal is to look at a different structure because as we are today, it's difficult to imagine that we can meet all the needs of seniors in the future. So we're looking at a project or a process that we develop where the county is the operational partner, the administrative partner, and then nonprofits and for-profits in the community provide the direct services. This is a model that's used around the country. But we will be pulling folks together. The first step, of course, is this conference that we're having in May during Older Americans Month with the Senior Coalition to start about building those services, building those relationships, building the aging network. So, any questions?
Any question? Ms. John?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Tarbutton, I do have a couple questions. The Senior Services Helpline, what's the phone number to that?
Senior Services Helpline, is that what?
What is the phone number to that?
328-2575.
Can you say it one more time? This is broadcast, so I'd like this public to get. Will you say it one more time? Say it one more time.
328-2575. Thank you.
I think it's important to point out to the people here in this joint meeting as well as the public that while our number one goal is to, I serve on the Senior Services Advisory Board, and as does Councilman Haschef as well as Councilman Lawson. And while it is most cost effective that we have seniors age in place, age at their house, it also is in response to the data every single year that is collected nationally. The number one fear for senior citizens in this country is that they will be institutionalized. It's a number one fear before death, so they'd rather die than go to a nursing home. And a vast majority of them, that this is, and it's consistent every year that we do these surveys. So I just want this body to understand that it's also humane. What we're doing is we're addressing their major fear as they're aging. And then finally, you said that there's going to be a first ever coalition meeting. When is that in May? And where is it?
It's May 15th at St. Mary's. We'll be sending announcements out this week. The Senior Coalition is a membership group of about 40 agencies, 150, 175 people. And they have been meeting monthly for about 12 or 15 years. We're now trying to build that into a leadership group that helps establish recommendations for the community, brings partners together. And this May 15th conference is the first step doing that. We are bringing in Denise Klein, who was the woman that helped the state develop their strategic plan about 10 years ago to facilitate the meeting.
And what time is this?
It's going to be at 8 o'clock to noon at St. Mary's. Again, we will get announcements out. We'll make sure they get out there.
I just want the public to get it because they don't get this.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you, Mr. Tarbutton.
Mr. Lawson.
Yeah, Grady, I also serve on the Senior Services Advisory Committee. It's important to point out, too, that Senior Services is funded by an ad valorem tax, similar to Animal Services. But unlike Animal Services, it wasn't overfunded to begin with. And you're experiencing a shortfall that needs to come from the general fund from Washoe County. How much is that, roughly?
The general fund shortfall right now is projected to be about $230,000. Yes.
And you also receive matching funds from the federal government?
We do. We get 1 cent ad valorem tax that was passed in 1985. And by the way, there is no sunset on that tax. We use that money to match federal dollars, whether it be Medicaid, the Older Americans Act, or other grants. Most of our funding comes from grants and not from local dollars.
So, and that was important to point out in my mind, is that hopefully one day I will be a senior citizen and take advantage of some of the programs. But it's important to know that most of this money is coming from the federal, or a lot of it's coming from the federal government down. And how much would you, if you're going to guess, and this is a wild guess, if the $230,000 wasn't funded, how much matching grant money would that then take away?
It would be between $400,000 and $500,000.
Okay. So I think that's important to point out for the people too, is that, you know, for an investment of $220,000 or $230,000, we get $400,000 back. That's a pretty big number. Thank you.
Mr. Haschef.
Yeah, I also serve on the advisory board, and the reason we wanted to see this item on the agenda, because we understand the county's making difficult decisions with respect to cuts across the board with their departments, but our advisory boards were very concerned about the $230,000 shortfall, and as Councilperson Lawson indicated, the loss of the matching funds, and then in the real big picture, all of the programs and services that Washoe County could not provide based on that $230,000 shortfall. So, I mean, from the City of Reno's perspective, I think I speak for all of us, we want to jointly come up with a solution, just like some of the other agenda items that we had today, and figure a way to keep those services in play, because without, when you go through the programs that are going to be cut and all of the people that are really currently underserved, because, you know, there have been some difficult decisions that have been made on the budgets, not just now, but in the last several years, it would be devastating to this community. So I don't know where the county commissioners are on this, but at least from my perspective, we would like to work jointly with the county to make sure that those cuts do not occur.
Ms. Reddy.
Yeah, I wanted to echo Councilman Hasjo's comments and some of Councilman Lawson's comments in that, again, this is an area where we can spend money on the front end, or we can spend money on the back end and have it be significantly more money. I think the Daybreak program is a perfect example of that, where you can get families daycare for a senior that can't stay at home by themselves, but then that family can still take care of them, as opposed to putting that same senior in a facility at a cost of $60,000 a year. You know, we can demonstrate the cost savings. I think the challenge is, and I think it's what Councilman Lawson pointed out, is that while we did go to the voters and we did ask for funding at some point in the past to fund senior services, we didn't ask for enough. And it's consistently proven, even prior to this economic downturn, to not be sufficient to meet the needs that are out there. And I just believe as a community there's certain lines that we draw in the sand. And a hungry senior, you know, a senior that doesn't have shelter, clothing, meals, a senior that gets moved into an institution when they really don't need to be in an institution, where there's a lower cost community option. I think that's a line that if we went out to the voters and asked again, is that a line you want to cross? I think there would be a resounding no. I think that the people of this community do not want to see seniors suffer in that way. And the fact of the matter is we're spending, you know, we voted for 3 cents for animals and only 1 cent for seniors. So I would be for moving together, not necessarily today with action, but if there's a great public-private partnership happening at a summit in the very near future, that we figure out how on the long term to get this on the ballot, again, ask our community what they want to do about this issue, because I just don't believe that this is a community that wants to see seniors starving or see seniors in an inappropriate institutional setting when they really could be served in a community-based way.
Ms. Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the record, Katie Simon, Washington County Manager. I just wanted to make it clear on the record for everyone that the tentative budget that Washoe County has prepared does not include reducing the general fund subsidy to senior services. We did have slightly more, or I should say, less of a decline in property tax revenues than we had anticipated, and we'll use some of that to restore that. Again, it's not enough. We all recognize that it's not enough, and there is much more we could all do for our seniors if we had more money in that account. But we will not be reducing that general fund subsidy.
Mr. Ozzie.
Yeah, I think everyone's breathing a sigh of relief there that you were able to find that. So thank you very much for being able to do that. But I think Councilman Ratty brings up a great proposal. I don't know if we can wait till May. We should have that discussion now. Do we want to put something on the ballot? Because the time frame is you've got to know by June, I think, and have the language ready and all that stuff to put something on the ballot. I'd be in favor of asking the voters if they want to put a penny or 2 pennies towards senior services. We should have that discussion sooner rather than later to see whether we want to do that. I know it has to be, the county commission has to ultimately decide that, whether to put it on a countywide ballot or a citizens initiative. Well, I'm sorry, but we can't, because here's what happens. If the voters vote on 2 cents, the Debt Management Commission then tells the rest of us where we have to lower our rate. But that becomes a dedicated source of funding. So the voters can vote to take us over the cap, and then the Debt Management Commission makes us get under it again by some manner that they do it. So that can happen if we want to continue and get a dedicated source for seniors like we do with animal control. I think that's possible, and we should be talking about that and putting that on the table.
Mr. Kerrigan.
Thank you, Mayor. A place to look for that, maybe an easy solution to that, is if we have $5.5 million surplus for animal control, maybe we can just ask the people to shift a penny of it from animal control to senior services. Therefore, you're not paying any more, we're just shifting it, and that could be a ballot question.
Okay, any other discussion? Thank you for the update. Appreciate it very much.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
We do have public comment on this issue.
Okay.
Stephen Jacobs, followed by Sam Dene.
Good morning and thank you. And I think this is the first time I've followed Sam. So excuse me. First thing I want to say is thank you.
Identify yourself for the record.
Oh, Stephen Jacobs, citizen of Reno and Washoe County. I think many of the members, particularly the ones who have been on the council, like Councilman Roddy and Lawson and so on, have said everything I was going to say anyway. I have been, in the last few months, talking to senior groups, probably a dozen by now, and she's absolutely right. Their fear is ending up in a nursing home. And they would love us to do anything we can to delay that happening. And I'm sure that if anything comes before them, that they and their families would support it. So I think the idea of doing it now and doing it as quickly as possible to raise the money towards improving senior programs, especially in the area of health, is very important. And I encourage you to do that as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sam Dene, followed by Connie McMullen.
Sam Dene, the Philanthropical Encyclopedia of Reno Government. And as a matter of fact, Mr. Lawson and Mr. Halfchef have also said everything that Sam was going to say. Well, almost everything. Now let me get this straight for the record. Ms. Simon over here just said that they are not going to shut down Daybreak in spite of the fact that Sam ordered you not to shut down Daybreak. Now, is that correct? Did you just say you're not going to shut down Daybreak? You said something that sounded very much like that, because I'm here to defend the continuing existence of Daybreak, one of the greatest functions we have in the community. And when I analyzed, that was a rhetorical question, when I analyzed the $230,000, and everybody should walk in Sam's shoes, at least for a year, or 5 years, or maybe a week. Sam has seen so much money wasted in this community that Sam warned you, by the way, I'm Sam, that Sam has warned you about over and over again. And you talk about $230,000. I know Mr. Andy, the abracadabra man claimer, could find $230,000 probably under that table right there. This building, you spent $1 million refurbishing a perfectly good building. $1 million, and I told you not to. I told you to save some money for the rainy days and all of the other stuff. And we're not here to be a curmudgeon. And by the way, there is another. If the fear of being institutionalized is the number one fear of the senior, number two is the fear of not having any more tequila. So I hear. At any rate, I'm just trying to add a little. I was going to leave a long time ago, but I was having such a good time watching this brouhaha that I just had to stay. It's better than any soap opera you can find on TV, although it did have its dull moments. At any rate, $230,000 to save Daybreak and maybe some other. And Mr. Lawson's, thank you for asking that question and pointing out the exact number. It's about. Mr. Iazzi's the genius here, financially speaking, but it's almost a 2-to-1 doubling to help. I mean, it would be like my not taking in a retirement fund if my boss is going to put in $5 for every dollar I put in. How could I not do that? So how can you possibly shut down these things that pay for themselves and then pay for themselves again and again? And by the way, I'm glad that the animal center is staying intact. There's enough money elsewhere not to have to go there. And I love my little pit bull guard dog that I got from that animal center over there. And so I'm glad that everybody's going to be happy, and I'm glad we're saving Daybreak for the record.
Connie McMullen, followed by Donna Klotz.
Hi again, for the record, Connie McMullen, Chairman, Senior Center Advisory Board. Thank you very much for finding the additional revenue. Thank you. And I really do appreciate it. I appreciate the fact that all of you, some more than others, because we've educated you who have been on our boards, understand the huge need that is out there. What I am interested in, and I'm glad we got over this immediate crisis, is moving on. And Councilman Ayazi, thank you very much for making those suggestions. I'm looking for, though, a concrete organization or structure that we can do that. I don't want to leave here today without some sort of assurance that we're not going to move forward on this, because this is very important. The population is not diminishing, and either is the need. And I'm not just saying that casually. The numbers show it. So we need to go there. There's nothing worse than not having a place for an elder who can't stay at home. The stories are out there, and I'm sure that the police and the fire can tell you. It's not good to see a senior with Alzheimer's in the county jail over at Parr Boulevard for a month, and we did have that. And so I'm glad we're going there, but I want some assurance that we move forward. But I thank you all for your understanding. Thank you.
Donna Klotz.
Donna Klotz, for the record. I serve on the Reno Senior Citizens Advisory Board. I was gone for a little while. I was at a seniors meeting at the Continuum where Daybreak is, and I want to thank you on behalf of the folks that are in that room right now with their social worker, doing exercises in the chairs and getting some socialization and getting some services there. It's so important that all of you have seen how important that priority is, and I want to thank all of you for putting the time in today to work together on solving the problem. I commend the City of Reno for adding seniors to their priorities for the coming year, and I know that all of you have seniors at heart. We all are heading that way every day, and it's so important that we use the resources that we have locally, because as a lot of people know, all politics is local, to get the money that comes from the federal and the state and all the other places that we can get that money to make those programs there so that our seniors have a decent quality of life. So thank you all for doing this today.
Thank you. Any other further public comment?
That was it, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Councilman Ash.
Yeah, it got me thinking what Connie McMullen brought up and what Councilman Kerrigan brought up. We also could go out and do exactly what Mr. Kerrigan suggested without having to go to the voters. The whole idea of what the county was allegedly going to do before was to reduce the fee to animal control and then re-implement it, and we just didn't think that was legal. But they certainly can reduce that, and we could all agree not to impose that 1 cent tax. Let's say they reduce their animal control by a penny. Then any one of us could take that and raise our tax up to up that penny. We could all agree that if they do that towards senior services, we would let them do that. We could do that today, so that would be a dedicated source, whether it's a JPA or we all have to agree on what they spend it on or not. I think the commissioners, we don't need to do that. If we just agree today that they could, if they lowered that in their budget and they put this penny back in, I'd be absolutely fine with that.
Except we're not agendized to do that.
But we could, well, we're agendized to talk about it, so they'd know at least, are we going to hit hiccups later on? If people are in favor of it, we could at least move forward. If they're not, we could bring up things now.
I would defer to the DA to opine whether or not we're agendized for that today. Discuss that.
Mr. Chairman, your item number 10 is update and status report on Washoe County Senior Services programs and service levels. I think a discussion is appropriate. You could certainly accept the report, but I don't think any action on creating a JPA or a dedicated funding program would be appropriate today.
Thanks, Mr. Liberelli.
But the discussion could be, are people in favor of it in principle without a vote? That could be part of a discussion.
Councilman Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that was the question I was going to ask, and I agree that the agenda does not allow us to make any decisions here, but I don't think we left it with what we were wanting staff to produce for us or what we wanted staff to do. That was my question, is because we had several things on the table. And so, to me, the discussion was, what are we asking for staff to bring back to us? Everything's time sensitive right now. I believe it's June the 1st that a ballot question has to be in place. Maybe this is another option to Mr. Ayazi. What are we asking for staff to produce for us to come back, and how soon?
Depends on when we want to meet again.
Our next scheduled meeting is, well, the mayors and the chair will consider that on the 17th of this month. The next regular scheduled meeting is June.
Yeah, see, I'm in favor of us meeting jointly. That could even go separately, quite honestly, quicker perhaps. If people, that's what I mean, if people are in favor of it, we could ask staff to bring back that proposal that would allow the county to do that. And we would, I think the city of Reno and Sparks, we'd only have to agree to not impose the 1 penny. That's all the agreement we would have to do. And the county would say, okay, and we would just trust them that they put it to seniors. And I trust the commissioners to do that.
Any further discussion, or Ms. Simon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Katie Simon, Washington County Manager, for the record. Just wanted to clarify the schedule. If you wanted to do a ballot question, you have actually until mid-July to do that. So you could have the next scheduled joint meeting to talk about that.
Councilman,
could it, even though for our next regular scheduled meeting, do we have enough time between then and July to have a ballot question ready? That's my concern, is that, it's my understanding some of these things can take 30, 60 days just to get all the answers and questions and they're formulated to be constitutional to put the ballot question on in the first place, much less the answers of things. If there's an appetite to put it on as a ballot question, I think we need to have something scheduled very quickly in the next 2 to 3 weeks to be able to move that forward.
Councilwoman Zender.
Thank you. I've received information from Connie McMullen previously about the exponential growth in senior numbers and those requiring services because of the group I'm in, the baby boomers, who are hitting that aging out level. And I think that would be beneficial for all of us to receive. So Grady or whomever, Connie, if you could share those numbers with us, that would be incredibly helpful as we move forward and determine what proactive steps do we need to take, because it is a significant growth pattern that's projected.
Any further suggestions or recommendations to staff?
Mark, while on the surface that's a great idea that Councilman Kerrigan came up with, I'd like to see what the effects are of taking the 1 cent away from animal services and vice versa, adding it on to senior services before a decision's made. But it's on the surface, it's a wonderful idea.
And I'm sorry, was there somebody else that wanted to?
Yeah, I think Councilman Ayazi brings up a good point in following up with what Connie had to say. I think these folks deserve some kind of comfort level or commitment. I know it's not properly agendized, but at a minimum, I think we could send this to our respective staff and then have them work on the next available joint meeting and what that schedule would be. If we have to put something on the ballot, let's just build the calendar so we can meet and have that discussion timely so we don't miss any of those opportunities.
Councilwoman Reddy.
And I would support that as well. I mean, while I understand the need for urgency, and I second it, that we figure out what we're doing, I think that there are some variables. So if I would encourage the mayors and the chairman to schedule it so that we can act, because I would like to know what we can accomplish with a penny in senior services and if that's sufficient, because what I don't want to see us do is exactly what we did before, which is underfund it and then not be able to deliver. And so I don't know if a penny is the right amount. I don't know if 2 pennies is the right amount. I'd like to know what we can get with that impact before we just agree to that. More is better, but if it's insufficient and it doesn't meet the needs, then it doesn't quite get us there. So I know it's a lot to ask of staff in a short period of time, but that's what I would like to ask of staff, is that we see what does a penny do, what does 2 pennies do, and what does that reverse penny do to the animal services budget in the long term. Because what I don't want to do is create the problem that we have in senior services for animal services by just moving the penny if what we really need is another penny.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councilman Guston.
Thank you, Chairman Larkin. Just as add my voice to the straw vote that I think that Councilman Azzi is looking for as one of two at this dais, two septuagenarians who don't need the services right now, but certainly may need them in the near future. I would like to see this move forward also. I think it just makes a tremendous amount of sense. And Councilman Kerrigan, I think you're right on about getting the money that's available, but not, as Councilman Lawson said, not hurting the other one. But certainly I look forward to taking advantage of those services should I need them in the near future. So I'd like to see this move forward.
You don't already need them? I mean, I'm sorry. Excuse me. No, I just said that.
Okay, I think staff has their direction, and as I hear it, the mayors and the chair will consider at the next mayors and chairs meeting perhaps bumping that schedule up, as I understand what we're talking about there. So any further discussion on this item? All right, then let's move on to, well, first let's, those that would like to leave the dais at this time as we move on to,
We've got to close out with public comment and open with public comment.
Right, public comment on that item.
Closing out with public comment.
Mr. Chairman.
We do have one public comment,
Okay.
although, Mr. Liparelli? Sam Dene?
Sam Dene, the Encyclopedia of Reno Government, and thank you, Mr. Larkin, for recognizing the detail of the fact that you have to have a public comment at the end of this meeting as you adjourn to go into another meeting in a few minutes. At any rate, I'm again somewhat astounded that they are going to continue to save Daybreak in spite of the fact that Sam has spoken adamantly in favor of saving Daybreak. That doesn't happen very often. I have to be very careful about what I speak in favor of and what I speak against, because many of the government personnel up there vote just the opposite of whatever Sam says, just because Sam happened to be the one who said it. And of course the media will never point out the massive amount of philanthropical soothsaying that Sam has been capable of for the last 18 years. And I'm sort of filibustering a little bit because I have 3 minutes here instead of my normal measly 2 minutes that the county commission allows. This is a wonderful thing. I don't want to overstay my welcome. So, and the mayor said thank you. I do have to say one thing, though, in all seriousness, for a change. I was critical of the Secretary of State last week at the Reno City Council meeting because I said that the Secretary of State has started a new program for filing your campaign contributions and expenses, whereby you have to use a computer to do it. Up until this year, it was basically all done on paper. You could go down, fill out your papers, turn them in, and see that you had it right there. Well, I took a look at that situation, and I have to say it is a little hard to get initiated into the computerized campaign. And Ms. Young is looking at me askance. I don't know, or she's just chewing gum. What is that? Anyway, it's a little difficult to get in, at least it was for me, to set up the codes. But once you're in there, the thing is really, really well done. So I don't want to apologize to the Secretary of State, but I want to give them kudos for having put up a fairly good citizen-friendly operation for filing your campaign contributions. Not that I've gotten any yet, even though I'm running for United States Congress. By the way, I'm not asking for any contributions.
Well, now we'll close the public comment section. And now we will excuse everybody that gets lucky enough to be excused. And then we'll go into the next. But thanks everybody for being here. Go to short.